Episode 331, The Successor That I Chose. Luke's performance in March this year had disrupted the University of Chicago's momentum. So after Bessy had emerged in December, her name was familiar to the teachers of the two universities. She was this year's top scorer who had been fought over by both of them, but was finally snatched up by Northwestern University. Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby's hearts sank. He felt even more uncomfortable upon hearing Dean Hoffman speak, not only because of his words, but also because of the heartache over Bessy's lost opportunity. While they were talking, the list was refreshed again. This time, the 20th to 30th places were shown. Dean Soup saw that 3 Northwestern University students were on the list this time. It wasn't an easy feat to place within the top 30 out of the 100 people. But Dean Soup couldn't be happy and just had a heavy heart. Dr. Weatherby sat down and didn't want to look further. Both of them knew that 30th place was Bessy's limit, and it was almost impossible for her to place above that. The list refreshed again. This time, there were 4 names from Northwestern University, but Bessy's name was still missing, making Dean Soup's heart instantly fall into an ice cellar. Standing on the side, Dean Hoffman glanced at the 6 University of Chicago students on the 10th to 20th list and turned to Dean Soup with a smile. "Dean Soup, I haven't seen your school's queen yet. She must have placed in the top 10. And maybe even secured first place again." Some laboratory staff heard his words, exchanged glances, and couldn't help but laugh. When Luke's name had appeared in the first place in March this year, the entire laboratory and the 2 universities had been shaken to the core. But Luke had participated in the training. As for Bessy, Dean Hoffman glanced at Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby with a trace of ridicule in his eyes. He thought that President Flores and the others had been unable to do their jobs well and had mistakenly handed in the wrong list, letting a freshman who had never participated in the training take part in this assessment. Furthermore, Leo White was also in the December assessment. Even if he wasn't, however, Northwestern University couldn't hope to make such waves this time. Dean Hoffman was thinking casually to himself about all of this, not in the mood to bother about his words. Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby had their hands lowered, and they were about to go back to school, not wanting to look at the names on the screen. In the center of the room, the list was refreshed again. The list showed the 1st to 10th place now. Other than Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby, everyone else's eyes were focused on the screen. Unexpectedly, the refreshed list caused a big commotion. The name at the top was explosive for the laboratory as well as the 2 colleges. "Dean Hoffman, congratulations in advance to the students of your college for taking number 1 again." As soon as the list was refreshed, the staff member congratulated Dean Hoffman in advance. Other people beside him also echoed the congratulations. While talking, they glanced at the center of the big screen. The list had been refreshed, and they could clearly see the list of names. They were suddenly speechless. Dean Hoffman's complacent smile suddenly disappeared. The other people clamoring to congratulate him also suddenly quieted down. The lobby on the first floor of the laboratory fell into an unprecedented, weird silence. Dean Soup, Dr. Weatherby, and the others were already walking out, deep in thought. A teacher beside Dean Soup felt the abnormal quietness behind him and paused. He glanced behind him and completely froze. "Dean Soup, Bessy has appeared." Upon hearing this, Dean Soup paused. He suddenly thought of something and turned back at the same time as Dr. Weatherby. He saw the big screen in the center at a glance. The lobby list showed the 1st to 10th places. Both Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby could clearly see the black bold letters written on it. Number 1, Bessy Miller, Northwestern University, 300. Number 2, Leo White, the University of Chicago, 287. Number 3. Everyone's eyes were on the first line of words. Number 1, Bessy Miller, Northwestern University, 300. "Dr. Weatherby." Dean Soup's whole body was stiff. Did I see wrongly? First place. Who's the first place? How many points?" He felt like he might be confused. Otherwise, how could it be possible to see Bessy in the first place, and how could she have gotten full marks? Luke had scored 296 in March. There had been a huge commotion at that time as well. But now, this score was even more impressive. Bessy Miller. Dr. Weatherby stared at the name and score without blinking, saying word by word, 300. Full marks. He exchanged glances with Dean Soup. Before that, both of them had strongly believed that Bessy would have no problem in the written exam and might even score above the 50th place. But now, though she was indeed a finalist, and her name was in the top 50, it was in the first place, and she had even scored an unprecedented full mark. This matter seemed about to explode. At the same time, other people in the room also reacted. The laboratory staff, as well as the teachers of several universities, looked at the ranking dumbfounded, especially Dean Hoffman, who was staring at the 300 points in a daze. The words were clear in bold script. After a weird silence, like boiling water, the room erupted. How could it be? Did they write the score incorrectly? Everyone, including Dean Hoffman, wondered this, but all of them knew the possibility of making a mistake on the score was almost non-existent. Everyone exchanged glances. What's the matter with Northwestern University's new students this year? Aren't they all abnormal? A laboratory member who knew Luke couldn't help but exclaim. Luke trained for a few months before the assessment, but didn't she just enter the school? This result dropped a bomb on all of the senior students in the laboratory. In order to restore the University of Chicago's reputation, even Leo had been made to participate in the assessment when he didn't need to. But in the end, he was still pressed to the ground by Northwestern University's queen. Dean Hoffman's expression was dark when he saw this result. Without saying a word, he walked out of the laboratory. The group of doctors who followed him exchanged glances, and someone hesitantly said, Bessy scored full marks in her college entrance examination as well. Her theoretical results have always been good, but the laboratory assessment theory is only the first selection and isn't very important. We'll still have to see tomorrow's experiment test. In this regard, Leo has been studying for 2 years. Our school has a lot of resources and he will definitely save the situation. Also, I heard that Bessy has never entered the laboratory. Tomorrow's experiment will definitely be a certain degree of difficulty for her. The others nodded and agreed. There was no joke about this matter. The theoretical examination was just a hurdle for the experimental assessment. The laboratory was still focused on hands-on experiments. According to the previous statistics, at least 30 of the top 50 would then be wiped out. Of course, this person only noted that the experiment would be somewhat difficult for her. Obtaining the first place in the written examination already demonstrated enough of her strength. Naturally thinking of this, Dean Hoffman's expression gradually eased. He took out his phone to call Leo. Leo was in the University of Chicago's laboratory, working on his own experiment. He picked up the call. Dean Hoffman. Prepare well for the assessment tomorrow. Do your best, Dean Hoffman said while looking out the window of his car. The University of Chicago had specially brought Leo out for the exam, and if Bessy beat him in both theory and experiments, he would be embarrassed in the research institute. He had to win at least one of the 2 exams. Leo was fascinated by the experiment and hadn't been very concerned about the assessment. But upon hearing Dean Hoffman's words, his desire to win was aroused. Okay, Dean Hoffman. I happened to study an experiment with my teacher. I didn't intend on using it for such trivial things like the assessment. Dean Hoffman heaved a sigh of relief. Which level? You'll find out tomorrow. Leo threw an electronic board aside and said in a confident tone, I won't let you down. On the other side of campus, Dr. Weatherby and Dean Soup returned to the Northwestern University office in a daze. The news of Bessy obtaining first place had spread in the Science and Technology department. The department's professors hadn't expected this result. They held an overnight meeting. This time, our Northwestern University achieved great success in the written test, especially Bessy. Dean Soup smiled, his eyes bursting with pride. Bessy had surprised them all very much. Turning the pen in his hand, Dr. Weatherby looked serious. She passed the written test, but we can't stop there. Tomorrow's experimental exam is the focus, but I don't know if Bessy has mastered the experiment. As they were speaking of experiments, a professor from the nuclear engineering department suddenly said, Bessy seems to be doing a sea-level experiment. Sea level? Dr. Weatherby sat upright. Are you sure? Yes, she asked me a question about a sea level experiment. The doctor adjusted his glasses and narrowed his eyes. I don't know the specifics. Several other nuclear engineering professors also raised their hands and indicated that Bessy had indeed asked them questions about nuclear engineering. Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby exchanged glances. If that's the case, then Bessy won't have a problem entering the laboratory. Dean Soup felt relieved. The sea level experiment was the lowest threshold for the assessment. Now, Dean Soup didn't hope for her to obtain first place. Regardless of whether her score could exceed the University of Chicago, he only hoped for her to enter the laboratory. Nothing else mattered. Bessy had returned to the Highline Apartments. Tomorrow was the final test. Bessy didn't bother experimenting and just sat on the sofa playing mobile games with her eyebrows lowered. Michael leaned against her, his hand resting lazily on a pillow, holding his phone in the other hand as he talked to Tucker on a game page. One was playing games, the other was chatting. Both were very calm. Opposite them, Rosemary and Joshua, sitting upright, started fidgeting.
It's 8 p.m. already.
Joshua glanced at the time on his phone and urged Rosemary.
Hurry up and ask them about their assessment results. Has Bessy passed?
Episode 332, Bessy's Laboratory Assessment. Okay. Rosemary was sitting with her legs crossed in a very polite way. Taking out her phone, she found a number, checked the time, and dialed it immediately. That morning, Marvin had told Joshua that Bessy had gone to take the laboratory exam for the first time, and Joshua had almost suffered a heart attack. The Clark family was very powerful, so Joshua had asked the butler to find out what happened at the laboratory. In the afternoon, he received reports of the rumor that Bessy's name had been a mistake. He was so furious that he called to scold President Flores. President Flores said that Bessy would definitely pass, which appeased his anger. But he didn't say anything else. Although he had got President Flores's affirmative answer, Joshua was still very uneasy. He had only eaten a few bites of dinner and had stayed here the whole day. After Rosemary found out about this, she had also put aside the things at hand and came over. In the eyes of the major families, the Science and Technology Laboratory assessment was more important than the college entrance examination and was related to a person's future. Rosemary had failed the medical laboratory at 168 points when she took it, and even Joshua couldn't save her. After dialing the number, Rosemary immediately asked about Bessy's results for the written examination. The person on the other end of the phone paused, and then said in a fumble,
She passed, of course she did, but it was a little unexpected.
What? Rosemary tightened her fingers around the phone and slightly frowned. The person paused and then faintly said,
Oh, she unexpectedly got the first full score of 300 in history.
Rosemary was speechless. She was stunned. Joshua intently stared at her, putting down his teacup and asking in a deep voice,
Did she pass?
Rosemary's expression didn't seem joyous, but a little surprised. Joshua closed his eyes and grumbled.
She didn't pass?
He frowned involuntarily and took out his phone to call President Flores. After hanging up, Rosemary reached out to hold Joshua's hands, preventing him from dialing President Flores's phone. Her eyelashes trembled and she quietly said, Bessy passed. His tense heart instantly relaxed. Glancing briefly at her, Joshua picked up his teacup, took a sip and calmed his mood. He slightly lifted his chin.
What's with your expression? You scared me. I already said, how could Bessy not pass? I already taught you several times as the Clark's family representative, you have to keep your composure outside.
Rosemary indeed couldn't maintain her composure at this moment. No. Shaking her head, she pursed her lips and glanced at Bessy as if she was abnormal. Disregarding Joshua, her tone was almost broken.
Tell me, how did you score 300 points in the extremely difficult laboratory assessment?
Joshua coughed and almost choked on his tea. Rosemary faintly glanced at him.
Dad, stay composed.
She had taken the laboratory assessment before. Although she was from the medicine department, the difficulty of the assessment for the several major research institutes were generally the same. Rosemary remembered that she had scored 168. and had ranked 71st place in the assessment, failing the written exam. Only then did she realize that she couldn't enter the research institute without relying on her family. At the same time, she also understood the difficulty of the test and how those who passed with scores above 270 points were gods. But Bessy had scored 300 points. Bessy was still playing games and had yet to pass the level she was on. When Rosemary asked her a question, she looked up, thought for a while, and solemnly said, I just took it seriously?" Rosemary was speechless again. She stared hard at her, trying to figure out if she was joking. "Bessy, which exam have you not taken seriously before?" If she had asked Marvin, he would definitely have told her about Bessy's operation in Chicago. Rosemary now felt like if she hung out too much with Bessy, she might mistake herself for a fool. Since Bessy had an experiment to perform tomorrow, both Joshua and Rosemary urged her to take a bath and rest early. Rosemary heaved a sigh of relief when she went upstairs.
How was Bessy prepared for the experiment?
In the cold weather, Joshua let Marvin pour him a cup of herbal tea. He slowly drank it, glancing sideways at Michael, who was leaning back lazily in his chair. Michael put away his phone, laid his slender fingers on the pillow, and looked up.
It should be okay. Then she'll be able to enter the laboratory,
Joshua said. He trusted Michael's judgment. After receiving the news that Bessy had passed the assessment, they didn't stay long. Wrapping his black cashmere scarf around his neck, Joshua suddenly remembered what Michael asked him last time.
You asked me if my heart is good. Because of this?
If that was the case, he could understand. He was a little surprised. He hadn't felt that way when he saw Bessy's final examination results in Chicago. The phone in Michael's hand lit up and he glanced at it. It was Tucker, so he quickly unlocked his phone. Walking Joshua out, he calmly said,
Of course not. No?
Joshua glanced at him, wondering what else could make his heart suffer. But instead of replying to his question, Michael just walked with Joshua and Rosemary to the end of the hall. Once they got on the elevator, he turned his back and opened Tucker's message. Has my sister finished her exam? Tucker couldn't find a suitable teacher in Evanston and was way more leisurely than Bessy, so he didn't want to disturb her and asked about her through Michael. Walking upstairs, Michael slowly replied to him.
She finished one exam and has another one tomorrow.
At the Park Place apartments, Tucker received the news and told James beside him. Bessy did well in the exam. Jack was sitting on the other side, talking to Ricky about engineering. He didn't ask much about Bessy's exam. Nodding, James's dark eyes lit up.
Jack gave me a bank card today saying that it's my share after many years. Tomorrow, I'll go to the mall to buy a gift for your sister.
Having said that, he remembered how he had basically only bought gifts for Anne over the years. He felt a little uncomfortable. When Jack had given him the bank card, he only wanted to buy stuff for Bessy.
Oh.
Tucker turned on the computer and started to play games.
She'll like that.
Thinking of this, James went online to search what kind of gifts girls liked. The next day, all the applicants entered for the experiment in the laboratory. Yesterday, Rosemary and Joshua hadn't known that Bessy was taking the laboratory assessment, but since they knew it now, Rosemary had taken a temporary leave from the company and they had come over early in the morning to drive her to the laboratory with Michael. Through the rearview mirror, Michael glanced at the three of them sitting in the back seat. He very coldly stepped on the accelerator and drove in the direction of the laboratory. Compared with yesterday, Bessy's exam today was more of a big deal. Rosemary and Joshua walked on either side of her as they approached the building, asking her solicitously about her well-being. Her arms crossed and her eyes drooped. Michael coldly followed them, holding a thermos in one hand. When Bessy was about to go in, he took a step forward and handed her the thermos. Lowering his voice, he said with lazy tenderness, "Do well." Behind him, Rosemary watched as Bessy entered, then hugged the coat around her and straightened her back. The experiment seems to be hierarchical, right? She hadn't entered the experiment assessment when she'd taken the test and didn't know the process.
Yes, 6 quartiles.
Michael stared at Bessy's disappearing back. He took out the car keys, but instead of going back, just casually took out his cell phone to make a call. Turning sideways, Rosemary glanced at him. Are you going to wait for the result inside? Michael's eyebrows drooped, and he casually smiled.
Yeah.
The laboratory had access control, but that was nothing to him. The experiment was held in the laboratory, but it wasn't on the first floor today. It was on the ground floor. Bessy took the elevator door and arrived with a ding. The doors screeched open. The professors, staff, and students standing on the ground floor all involuntarily turned to stare in her direction. The people present here had been halved from yesterday's crowd. All 49 other applicants were present, 48 boys and 1 girl. Only Bessy was left to arrive. Everyone knew that Bessy was the person who took first place last night. The people in the hall were divided into 2 clearly distinguished camps, Northwestern University and the University of Chicago. Some students from the other schools didn't belong to either branch. But if they entered the laboratory in the future, these scattered students would be assimilated by the 4 major families or the 2 universities. No matter which college they were from, everyone whispered amongst themselves about Bessy. Bessy pulled up her beige scarf to cover her exquisite chin. Glancing around, she directly found Dean Soup and the group of Northwestern University students among the crowd and walked towards them. Dean Soup and the seniors of Northwestern University were waiting for her. They immediately waved when they saw her coming. There was a commotion. Opposite them, there was a group of people from the University of Chicago. Leo glanced over solemnly.
That's her?
Dean Hoffman nodded. Behind him, someone from the University of Chicago finally said,
Today's experiment is the focus, right? What are they making such a big commotion about?
Everyone else nodded in agreement. After Bessy took first place yesterday, the senior students of the University of Chicago had felt very embarrassed. It might have been acceptable if she had received training like Luke, but she hadn't. Everyone in the University of Chicago, including Leo, had made up their minds to do well in today's experiment. They would use 100% of their fighting strength and make up for their foul mood from yesterday. Compared to the University of Chicago, Dean Soup and the others weren't as utilitarian as before. Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby thought that as long as Bessy could pass the experiment this time, being selected by the laboratory was their greatest expectation. As for surpassing the University of Chicago to get first place in the total experimental score and winning resources for Northwestern University, that was another matter. Dean Soup didn't even expect such a difficult feat. It was exactly 8 a.m. The experiment began. The 50 students scattered into the hallway. Dean Soup stared at Bessy's back as she walked away.
Dr. Weatherby, do you think Bessy will perform a sea-level experiment?
Episode 333, Beyond Expectations. With his hand behind his back, Dr. Weatherby watched as Bessy disappeared into the laboratory and nodded.
Several teachers of nuclear engineering have said so it should be.
Today's experiment was very important. None of the teachers and professors present left the venue. They all stood outside the door on the first floor, waiting for the results. Everyone knew that today's experimental assessment carried the heaviest weight, because this determined the annual resource allocation. Out of so many experimental resources, grants, teachers, and places every year, it was impossible to equally divide these to each school. If a school wanted to get extra resources to obtain more, they would have to show results and talent. Otherwise, they would receive less of next year's resource allocation. Laboratory assessment was one of the most important indicators of who would get resources. The science and technology departments of both Northwestern University and the University of Chicago had been competing for more than a few years. Recently, because some students from the University of Chicago had climbed to the position of the Research Institute's management department, they had been allocated a lot of resources, so Northwestern University had been overwhelmed by them in the past 2 years. Fewer resources every year meant that the talented students cultivated every year weren't as powerful as the University of Chicago's students. It was a vicious cycle, and it only got worse. President Flores had found 2 top scorers, hoping to restore the university's status quo. The laboratory assessment was divided into 6 levels of experiments. The hardest was S, then A, B, C, D, and E. Students chose which level to complete, and each level awarded a different number of points. From top to bottom, they corresponded to receiving 100, 90, 80, 70, 60, and 50 points. A score of 70 and above would qualify them for the laboratory. The scores obtained by all candidates participating in the experiments from each college were added up. The college with the highest total score would have their proportion of funds and experimental equipment doubled by the end of this year. However, the University of Chicago had found resources every year and had a few more people who passed the assessment compared to Northwestern University, so Northwestern could never catch up to their scores. This time was of no exception. A total of 50 people participated in this experiment assessment. Only 8 were from the other universities, while 19 were from Northwestern University, and 23 were from the University of Chicago. Even if 19 people from each school scored similarly, the 4 extra people from the University of Chicago could create a gap of 200 points, even if they received the lowest score of 50. This gap was very difficult to surpass. Acknowledging this difficulty, Dr. Weatherby, let alone Dean Soup, had never thought about the possibility of closing the gap. They only hoped Bessy would enter the laboratory. As long as she did, based on her abilities, she could climb further up once inside, and it wasn't difficult for her to become a person of importance like Luke. As long as the two could climb up later, they could rectify the Northwestern University Science and Technology Department's resource problem from the root. Meanwhile, Bessy was observing the 6 various corridors which corresponded to the 6 levels of experiments. She glanced at the names of the corridors where experiments from every subject from computer science to nuclear engineering were lined up. Michael had told her about Northwestern University's assessment point system last night. Every student chose an experiment level at their maximum ability. After all, everyone wanted to pass the test and obtain good grades. The exam lasted 4 hours, from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. She pondered for a while and then walked to the E-level experiment. The teacher in charge of the E-level experiment was drowsily sitting on a chair. According to his past experiences, few people came to the E-laboratory at the beginning. The group of talents would slowly work their way down from around the sea level, confirming their inability before dropping 1 level. Few people started below the sea level. After all, those below that level would be eliminated. They had to at least give it a try. And this group of proud people wouldn't easily give up on the sea level. "You," the teacher stared at Bessy in shock. "Aren't you the new Northwestern University student queen?" It wasn't that Bessy's reputation had been spread to the laboratory. After all, most of the professors and doctors in the laboratory concentrated on experiments and were busy absorbing the knowledge of the world. They seldom paid attention to the new students unless the freshman was a genius and did a big research project in the laboratory. But this teacher had proctored Bessy yesterday and had a deep impression of her. Pulling down her scarf and hanging it on the doorframe, Bessy revealed her delicate chin and politely greeted the teacher. "Can I start?" "Of course," the teacher hurriedly said. He stepped aside and let her start the experiment. "The E-level experiment is the easiest. How could you come here? You should have gone to the sea level." There was no doubt that she would pass this level in the teacher's eyes, so he wondered why she had come here. "I'll go over later." Bessy glanced at the experiment table, her tone calm and slow. The E-level experiment was indeed the simplest and was on the permeability of water. She performed the main calculation, picking up the experimental equipment with her slender, cold fingers, looking methodical and familiar with the operations. It was a joy to watch her do the experiment. The teacher didn't have time to think about what she meant by later and just watched her do the experiment. 20 minutes later, Bessy handed the completed experiment report to the teacher. He took a look and confirmed that it was the correct result. He directly gave her an E-level card and told her, "You must go to the sea level." Taking the scarf from the hanger, she just looped it over her hand instead of wearing it. She thanked the teacher before leaving. She had completed her first experiment in just over 20 minutes. At this time, no one else had come to the E-level laboratory yet. The teacher walked towards the door to see if she had gone to the sea-level laboratory. When Bessy entered a laboratory, he looked up to see a sign hanging on the door. Level D? What was she doing? Staring at her calm back, he couldn't help but think of one possibility. This operation. The D-level experiment was a little more difficult. After all, it wasn't the lowest threshold for passing the laboratory. It took Bessy 20 minutes to complete it. She obtained the D-level card and put it in her pocket. Then, she stood in the corridor and looked around for the C-level laboratory. As the lowest threshold for entering the laboratory, the C-level had the most people in it. Bessy went to the room with the fewest people out of the 3 rooms. The other 2 students in the laboratory were still doing the experiment with their heads down. They were completely focused and naturally weren't aware that another person had entered. The C-level experiment was a watershed and was more difficult than the E and D-level experiments. The data was also much more complicated. However, calculations weren't a problem for Bessy. She saved a lot of time doing mental calculations. The C-level experiment teacher stood opposite her, staring at her for a long time. He watched as she wrote down some data and directly obtained the answer without even using the calculator beside her. She took almost 40 minutes to complete the C-level experiment. The teacher next to her blinked a few times before giving her the C-level card blankly. He doubted life as he watched her leave the laboratory. After finishing the C-level experiment, Bessy went to the B-level laboratory. There were 2 B-level laboratories, each with only 1 person. Bessy randomly entered one. All experiments from this level up were well above the C-level. The B-level experiment was much more difficult, and Bessy took 1 hour to complete it. But it was because she didn't spend much time calculating the proportion. After all, other students wrote down the calculation data on the manuscript paper and pressed the calculator over and over again, but she obtained the result with just 1 glance. Several teachers fell silent after watching her go from the E-level to the B-level experiment. Time passed, bit by bit. She next went to the A-level laboratory with 4 cards already earned. There were also 2 A-level laboratories, but only 1 room was occupied by 1 person. Bessy went to the empty room. She stopped at the experimental platform and looked around, only to find that this A-level experiment happened to be a miniature nuclear fusion reactor. Nothing was prepared on the experimental bench. They had to find the equipment from within the entire laboratory and then experiment on the reaction materials and install energy counting instruments by themselves. 4 hours passed by very quickly for the students. It was a drag for the teachers on the first floor. The laboratory staff moved over stools and made tea to let the doctors sit down with the deans. At around 11 o'clock, the doctors chatting in a group couldn't drink tea anymore. They looked intently in the direction of the corridor. According to previous years, students started coming out after 11 o'clock. Sitting in the center of the room, the teachers in charge of the laboratory assessment couldn't help but stare at the door. 2 people began making guesses.
Who will come out first, Bessy or Leo?
Leo, he should have experience. You can tell from Dean Hoffman's expression,
the other said. Then he paused and hesitantly said,
But it might be Bessy.
After all, Bessy's operation had been beyond everyone's expectations. No one could have expected her to obtain 300 points yesterday. The 2 exchanged glances and fell silent. They didn't dare to make random guesses. 10 minutes passed. At 11:10 a.m., the corridor door was pushed open, and a figure came out first. In the room, all teachers and professors drinking tea turned to look in that direction. The figure was slender. The person approached them with a light shining behind them. Everyone in the hall recognized Leo, the University of Chicago's favorite this year, who had already been accepted as an apprentice 3 years ago. Dean Hoffman stood up and glanced at his hand.
Have you finished it?
With a solemn expression, Leo directly stretched out his right hand, revealing the card in his palm. The whole card was black, with a white A engraved like snow in the middle. Episode 334. The New Queen Has Unlimited Potential.
Not bad.
Dean Hoffman's expression revealed faint pride and he coughed, his face barely suppressing his joy as he patted Leo on the shoulder. The 2 teachers in the experimental assessment today put the A card on the University of Chicago's side. The University of Chicago earned 90 points. They entered Leo's score on the computer.
A-level experiment?
The score was seen clearly, and the other people present roared in amazement. Over half of the teachers in the hall discussed this in low voices. They turned to look at Leo from time to time. The A-level assessment experiment was very difficult. Most students were stuck on the C-level, and it was rare to see someone who could finish the B-level experiment. Only 1 person had done the A-level experiment in the past 3 years. If it had been the previous years, Leo's A-level experiment would have attracted much attention. However, Luke had achieved the S-level experiment in March, and Bessy had obtained a perfect score in the theory test last night, so everyone's reactions were muted. After a few minutes of discussion, they continued looking in the direction of the corridor. 20 minutes passed without a second person coming out. It was obvious that Leo was very fast. At 11:30, people started coming out. The lowest card was the E-level card. As talents from the major colleges, they could at least obtain the E-level card. The two teachers were busy recording the scores. As more people came out, the scores of the two colleges showed a significant gap. At 11:50, the last student of the University of Chicago came out. The University of Chicago's points had been calculated. 1 A card, 2 B cards, 10 C cards, 7 D cards, and 3 E cards. A total score of 1,520. Northwestern University didn't have a single A card. The teachers tallied the scores. 1 B card, 7 C cards, 6 D cards, 4 E cards. A total score of 1,130. It was 390 points less than the University of Chicago, to no one's surprise. As for the final result, Northwestern University had no interest in that. Holding his teacup, Dean Soup stood up and looked at the corridor. At 11:50 a.m., everyone else had already come out of the laboratory except Bessy. Dean Soup frowned, his eyebrows revealing great anxiety. Did something go wrong with Bessy's experiment? At 11:55, she was still not out. At this moment, even Dr. Weatherby, who'd been pretending to be calm, squeezed his cup involuntarily. Dean Soup and he had been full of confidence that Bessy would pass the C-level experiment after the release of the written tests last night. Who knew that she would still not be out with 5 minutes left in the exam? Dr. Weatherby's heart was beating like a drum. In the corner of the hall, Rosemary sat next to Michael with a scarf covering most of her face. She held a cup of tea in her slender fingers. In front of outsiders, she maintained her composure and whispered, "Can Bessy make it in time?" Her anxiety didn't show at all, and she still looked composed and full of elegance. Playing with his phone, Michael stared at the long corridor. Although looking lazy, his eyes were clear and fixated on the door. Hearing this, he said, matter-of-factly, "Of course." Then why isn't she out yet? Rosemary was a little anxious. Squinting, Michael tapped on his phone. Wait. 11:58. The door still didn't move. Dean Hoffman got up from his chair and looked at Dean Soup. "Dean Soup, it looks like your queen isn't going to finish the exam in time." The two staff members also began to clean up the things on the table and announced, "The list of students who have passed this year has been compiled and will be posted on the first floor screen later. In addition, the University of Chicago has emerged victorious again." Dean Hoffman stood up, arranged his clothes, held out his hand to Dean Soup and smiled provocatively. "Excuse me, Dean Soup, did you let me win?" While he was speaking, the laboratory's door was pushed open by one hand. The door opened clearly. Everyone turned back. It was 11:59. Bessy came out with only a beige scarf in her hand. With raised eyebrows, she casually walked towards the two staff in charge of the experimental assessment. Dean Soup and Dr. Weatherby finally felt relief. "Bessy, where's your card?" Dean Soup noticed that she didn't have a card in her hand. Following his words, everyone focused on her hands, especially Dean Hoffman, who stared in her direction instantly as if he wanted to stare a hole through her. She was so late. No one believed she had completed any experiment, and only wanted to know which one she had attempted. In the corner, Rosemary straightened her clothes, sat down neatly and turned to ask him for the third time. "Michael, do you think Bessy did the S-level experiment? Otherwise, why is she only out now?" Michael hadn't replied to her previously, but at this moment, he lazily propped his chin, with his eyes still on Bessy, and seemed to think of something. 6. Huh? Rosemary was confused. Ahead, under nearly 100 gazes, Bessy reached into her pocket and threw out a black card. The black part of the card was very pure, and her fingers looked like cold marble against it. As she put it down, she raised her head at the two staff members and lightly said, "Start scoring." It was accompanied by a slight noise as several black cards fell onto the table. In the silent hall, this sound was enough to shake everyone's hearts. The level was printed on both sides of each card. After the cards settled, everyone could clearly see the letters. The 6 cards neatly showed E to S, a complete spread. A few people had guessed that she had more than one card when she drew them from her pocket, but they didn't expect her to have the full collection. In other words, she had completed all 6 experiments in 4 hours. Standing at the table, instead of waiting for the teachers to score the points, she lazily knocked on the table and asked, "Teachers?" The teachers recovered from their shock. They exchanged glances. It wasn't that they hadn't discussed if this year's new queen of Northwestern University could do very well. They had wondered if she would also do the S-level experiment like Luke had in March. But they didn't expect that besides the S-level experiment, she had completed all other levels as well. From the creation of the laboratory to this day, this was unprecedented out of hundreds of assessments. Only now did the other people realize that this was also a possibility. Was she a saboteur sent by Northwestern University? What should they do now? Bessy's score must be at least 100 because she had completed the S-level experiment. But what about the other cards? Should they be all counted towards Northwestern University's total score? The 2 teachers were even more confused. Since it was the first time this happened, they had to call the person in charge of the laboratory halfway through counting. The person in charge was speechless after hearing that she had done all the experiments in 4 hours. Was 4 hours too generous? Should they shorten it by an hour next year? Because the experimental requirements didn't clearly state how many cards a person could hold, in the end, all these 6 cards were counted towards Northwestern University's total score. Dean Hoffman opened his mouth. "This isn't fair." Upon hearing this, the 2 teachers smiled and said, "You can also have your students finish 6 experiments next time." These students took more than 2 hours to do an experiment, spending a huge amount of time on calculations and data. Forget about 6 experiments. Even Leo might not be able to complete more than 2. Dean Hoffman was speechless. Bessy obtained a total score of 450 points. Northwestern University's score changed from 1,130 points to 1,580 points. That was 60 points more than the University of Chicago's. Their result had been refreshed the moment Bessy was out. The highest solo record changed from Leo's 90 points to 100 points. The highest total score recorded changed from the University of Chicago's 1,520 to Northwestern University's 1,580. The 19 students from Northwestern University had defeated the 23 students from the University of Chicago. A few steps away, Dean Soup, who had seen Bessy with a handful of black cards from the beginning, was still stunned. He didn't know what to say and just took out his phone to call President Flores. President Flores knew that today was the experimental assessment. At noon, he had already been waiting for an hour about receiving notice from the laboratory. It made him feel a little uneasy. Upon seeing Dean Soup's call at this moment, he immediately answered it.
"Bessy passed the sea-level experiment, right?"
"She did."
Dean Soup's voice was almost floating on the other end of the phone.
"I have something else to tell you."
Breathing a sigh of relief, President Flores's tone eased.
"Go on."
Dean Soup paused.
"President Flores, are you standing or sitting?"
"Standing. What's the matter?"
President Flores chuckled, his voice thick and low.
"Find a place to sit down, please."
Dean Soup continued. Without asking to find out the reason, President Flores just happily sat down on the chair beside him and then said with a smile,
"I'm sitting down. What happened?"
"Oh, it's nothing much."
Dean Soup also came to his senses and calmly said,
"I just wanted to tell you that our Northwestern University score this year surpassed the University of Chicago's. We can have our funds and experimental equipment doubled. The results of the assessment have come out, and the laboratory will arrange a team for the experiments."
Dean Soup had convened a group of people who had been admitted to the laboratory this year and was instructing them.
"You've all been randomly assigned. The possibility of being grouped together is small. A series of files have to be transferred and some personal information has to be recorded before you finally enter the laboratory."
He looked in Bessy's direction after speaking. His lips were curled up uncontrollably in a smile. These 2 days had been a series of surprises. With a big wave of his hand, he invited everyone to dinner. Putting on her scarf, Bessy pointed in Rosemary and Michael's direction, declining President Soup's request for a treat. Dean Soup looked over and locked eyes with Michael's clear and cold gaze immediately. He quickly looked away, and after bidding farewell to Bessy, led the other students out for dinner. After the experiment cards were scored, they could be brought home as a trophy instead of returning them to the laboratory. Episode 335, James's Gift for Bessy. Holding the 6 cards, Bessy walked to Michael's side. Speechless, Rosemary stared at her for a long time before uttering, "Bessy, you're really—" She didn't even know what adjective to use to describe her.
Let's go and eat first.
Michael stood up with lazy eyes. Rosemary came back to her senses, staring at the cards in Bessy's hands, her eyes shining.
Bessy, let me touch your S card. I've never seen one before.
Bessy casually handed her the S card. Fiddling with it in her hand, Rosemary suddenly thought of Bessy's recent absences and chuckled.
No wonder I haven't seen you around in a month. You've been busy with the assessment.
She couldn't help but sigh at the mention of this. How did Bessy succeed in the assessment so casually and even obtain the first place after completing 6 experiments? Bessy followed behind them, and then the phone in her pocket rang. She took it out to see that it was a call from James.
Bessy, I bought you a gift. Where are you now? Let me give it to you.
James's voice on the other end of the phone was loud and excited. Tugging at her scarf, Bessy thought for a while and decided not to disappoint him. She told him they could meet on the streets of Northwestern University. The news that Bessy was successfully admitted to the laboratory spread on the Northwestern University forum. At the same time, Anne was in her bedroom. She was lying on the bed, scrolling through Northwestern University's forum. Today, the forum was full of Bessy. She had been admitted into the laboratory. Her news was everywhere in the posts. Anne was from the arts department and hadn't known about the 4 big majors at first. After spending a long time in school, she learned the difference between those 4 departments and the ordinary departments. She closed the forum, barely suppressing the gushing jealousy and faint regret in her heart. She pressed her phone to her chest. After a long while, she suddenly thought of something. She pursed her lips, found Tiffany's Twitter, and stared at her chat messages with her for a long time. Finally, she couldn't help but reach out and type a message. You mentioned previously that the violin song I played sounded like Noah's song. Do you still remember? Tiffany was an intense fangirl. She was a maverick in the Perez family, and had never cared about Anne and Grace's affairs. She only cared about her idol and was never concerned with the big violin incident. Anne had noticed this when Tiffany talked about Noah before, but had only found a few dark-style tracks from Noah. It was a similar style of music, but there had been no overlap in the arrangement. But if people like Tiffany, who wasn't very well versed in music, could remember it so clearly, there must be at least a few overlapping points. Anne waited for a long time, but Tiffany still hadn't replied. Pursing her lips, Anne clicked on the group chat from the school and found them talking about Bessy. She got up irritably from her bed. She took her backpack and went out for a walk. On Sunday, not many people were on the streets. Anne's phone buzzed and she glanced at it. Tiffany had finally replied to her. She didn't say anything, but simply sent a link. Anne wasn't familiar with Tiffany in the first place, so she didn't feel bad about Tiffany's indifference and even thanked her. After replying to her, she took out her earphones and put them in her ears and clicked on the link. She casually gazed in front of her as she walked. A familiar figure appeared at the intersection ahead. She paused, fixating her gaze on the figure that looked very strange in his suit and leather shoes in front of her. He was tall and had bronze-colored skin. Although handsome, he lacked any strong features. No matter how great the change was, Anne could still recognize him. It was James, whom she had bumped into back at the beginning of school. She hadn't taken the meeting to heart back then and originally thought that he had returned to his small town long ago. Who knew he was still in Evanston? She turned to gaze at the shopping bags in his hand, recognizing the logo from a big jewelry brand. Even during her glory days in the Smith family, this wasn't something she could casually purchase. How could James have this in his hands? She was about to choke out, "Dad!" But before she could speak, she saw James smiling brightly, handing the thing in his hand to a woman. The woman carelessly held the shopping bag. She had a scarf wrapped around her neck, revealing only half of her delicate face. Anne's heart trembled as she stared at her. Bessy. She couldn't help but feel mad. Why did James have such expensive jewelry, and he was giving it to Bessy? As for Bessy, every piece of her clothing was high-end. What was going on with these two people? Before she had time to think, a black car stopped beside them, and a middle-aged man got out of the driver's seat. He opened the rear door and respectfully held it as James got in. The car slowly drove into the crowd.
Bessy, what are you looking at? Rosemary came over from the other side and handed her a hot cup of tea. Shifting her gaze and taking the cup from Rosemary,
Bessy smirked absent-mindedly.
Nothing. I thought I saw something, but I was wrong.
The two headed towards the Highline apartments, returning in time for dinner. There were many people during the holiday. Michael's car was parked at the school and he decided not to drive it. After parking it in a spot, he told Marvin to drive it back when there were fewer people. Meanwhile, Anne returned to her and Grace's small apartment in a panic.
Anne, are you okay?
These past 6 months, Grace's life hadn't been as smooth as in Chicago. Her heart ached every time she thought of Bessy. Some wrinkles had been added to her face, which was missing the grace of a year ago. Her beauty was past her prime, but her features were still pretty. Glancing at her, Anne pursed her lips.
I saw Dad today.
Isn't your dad in Chicago?
Grace put down the cup in her hand and hesitantly spoke. There was no need for David to hide it from them if he came to Evanston. My other dad. Anne lowered her voice and looked down, covering the expression in her eyes. Realizing that Anne meant James, Grace was rather nonchalant.
What's the big deal? Evanston is such a big place.
Seeing her expression, Anne squeezed her phone tightly and said, Mom, I saw a chauffeur pick him up and be very respectful to him. He was also carrying expensive jewelry, which I saw him give to Bessy. Where did he get so much money from? After coming to Evanston so long ago, the two had only seen James during the start of the school, at which point they had avoided him. Grace understood the situation once Anne explained about the jewelry and clothes, but she instinctively thought that it was impossible.
Did you see incorrectly? How could it be?
Without thinking, she picked up the cup on the table again, her hands trembling slightly. Anne was a cautious person and would have confirmed it before telling her with such certainty. The two sat at the dining room table, silent for a while. After eating in silence, Anne slowly picked up her phone, returned to her room, and closed the door. Remembering the song Tiffany had sent, she put her earphones in and tapped on the music to slowly listen to it. The song was called Return to Silence. Clicking on the link and reading the comments, she realized that this was Noah's early music. Many of the copyrights to his songs had been sold, and this was one of them. Noah had also stated on Twitter that this song was very different to him. She finished listening to it. She felt uncertain. She glanced at the information below the song. Lyricist, Noah Hyber. Composer, Nico. Arranger, Nico. Noah composed most of his songs, and only the arrangement was done by Nico. Some of Nico's compositions were also very popular on the internet, but only this one was known to a minority of fans because the copyright holder stopped it from being widely available. It was composed more than 4 years ago, earlier than Bessy's violin composition. She went to the video of Bessy on Mr. Grint's Twitter page again. The section in the middle sounded exactly the same as Noah's Return to Silence. A crazed expression spread across her face like magma. The song plagiarism incident a few months ago had destroyed everything for Anne. At that time, she had been consumed by jealousy and tempted by the possible benefits, and she had only wanted to make Bessy leave. She had basically lost her mind and followed Mr. Anderson to do a series of irreparable things. In the past few months, she had looked back on what happened, only to realize that there was a pair of hands controlling the whole thing, pushing her down eternally. Meanwhile, Bessy had sat back at ease and was still buzzing in popularity at Northwestern University. Anne sneered at the thought of this and tightened her grip on the phone. Looking down, she clicked on the 2 pieces of music and saved them on her phone. At the Highline apartments, Bessy, Rosemary, and the others were still eating. Having finished his dinner, Marvin swiped through Twitter and suddenly looked up.
Miss Miller, is your reality show broadcasting on next Saturday?
Rosemary also put down her fork and slowly wiped the corners of her mouth with a tissue. Hearing this, she raised her eyes. What reality show? Marvin handed her the official Twitter account of the production. He concisely explained Tucker's affairs to her, The name of the variety show was 24-Hour Idol, a variety show that revealed the lives of celebrities through outdoor adventures. Glancing at it, Rosemary saw the preview trailer that had already been released. It was only 1 minute and 30 seconds, but Bessy, Katie's cousin, and the others had few shots. Zeke and Katie didn't have many shots, and the whole thing was edited like a suspenseful thriller. The comments below were all positive. Episode 336. Out of stock computer. The Miller family is back. Kat, who loves stars, wrote, this program is so amazing and actually invited Zeke Miller. I can't wait for next Saturday. Good luck to the production. Waiting for next Saturday. Little Fairy from Brother Miller's family wrote, Zeke Miller is an eternal beauty. Drunk in the Light wrote, the production crew would seriously be impressive if they managed to invite Noah. Haha. Some people continued discussing further down. Northwest Wind wrote, did Zeke bring his niece? Does she want to enter the entertainment industry as well? War God wrote, I can say with certainty that many people take advantage of reality shows to enter the entertainment industry. Although I want to see Zeke on this reality show, as a fan, I'm really worried, especially if he brings a niece who has never appeared in the entertainment industry before. Looking at the trailer, I feel like they don't look close. The comments section was quickly occupied by Zeke's fans. Most casual fans maintained a wait-and-see attitude, feeling like Zeke's niece might have been on the show to make money. Rosemary paused when she saw the words, Zeke's niece. She naturally knew that Zeke was part of the Miller family. Bessy's name had been mentioned by people in Evanston last year. She knew that she was from a small town near Chicago, and her family background wasn't exceptional, so she had been shocked by her several times after meeting her this year. Despite the Miller family's downfall, ordinary families still weren't comparable. And Bessy was Zeke's niece? She was also in the Miller family? Rosemary pondered this thoughtfully. Zeke wasn't the Miller family's direct bloodline, and the Miller family was now basically in the fourth son's hands, so she didn't know which bloodline Bessy belonged to. Bessy and Michael hadn't mentioned this, so she didn't ask. Smiling, she wrote down the show's name and returned the phone to Marvin. Then she turned expectantly to Bessy. What did you do on the show? Was it fun outside? Rosemary noted down the time as well. The show would air at 8 p.m. next Saturday. Looking up, Bessy slowly took a bite and then replied to her. We didn't do much, but it was fun. That's good. Rosemary rested her chin in one hand, smiling softly in anticipation. Speaking of this, she also remembered that at the beginning of last month, Michael had suddenly agreed to go to Hawaii. Marvin had also mentioned that the show recording had been there. She raised an eyebrow at Michael. Looking up slightly with unfocused eyes, Michael just nonchalantly glanced at her. You should return to the company after eating. Pausing, Rosemary still smiled gracefully and flawlessly. No. Before she could finish her words, she caught a glimpse of Michael staring at her, and sirens suddenly rang in her mind. Financial deficit warning. She quickly swallowed her words. Looking away, she coughed and straightened her back, maintaining her composure. You're right, I haven't been to the company all day. Rosemary was naturally not so idle, but she had stayed for a while out of curiosity for Bessy's assessment process. Marvin sighed seriously beside her. You don't even have weekends. Rosemary blankly glanced at him. He immediately shut up. After dinner, she rested for 10 minutes before taking the S-card from Bessy back to the company. Today was meant to be a break, but for a career woman like her, no day was a rest day. The chef took away their plates after they finished their meal. Marvin went to the kitchen to make a cup of tea for Bessy. Leaning on the sofa with a furry pillow in her hands, Bessy rested her chin on the pillow and drank slowly from the teacup. Michael sat beside her, his left hand lazily resting on the sofa behind her. He played the game software Tucker had sent him on his phone with his right hand. Tucker had played this game twice. Halfway through the game character would fall into the pit and die. Michael had raised his eyebrows the first time it happened. He had immediately closed the game the second time. He knew that Tucker had sent him this game as a trap. Not bothered about him at this time, he put his phone on the sofa and looked down at Bessy. She had fallen asleep, her long eyelashes drooping down, covering her faintly bloodshot eyes. This month, she had been doing experiments like crazy and looking at theoretical content. She had been even more stressed than while learning the violin during the summer vacation. The list of new members of the major laboratories had been released. The Science and Technology Department sent the list to the laboratory. Every year, new members of the laboratory would be assigned to a researcher's laboratory by lottery to learn the basics. This year was still a random allocation system by the drawing of lots. They would be assigned to whichever researcher the laboratory drawn belonged to. If the newcomer was lucky and met a researcher he could connect to, he could even be accepted as an apprentice. On Wednesday night, Bessy received the notification of her random assignment result from the laboratory system. She didn't really care about the result, since she didn't need to find a teacher. She casually clicked to take a look. She was assigned to Caleb Rostron's laboratory. She clicked on his information, which showed his identity as a special researcher. Her fingers paused.
What's wrong?
Michael put down his book and looked up after noticing her slightly surprised expression. Bessy shook her head. Why is a special researcher in the Northwestern University laboratory? Shouldn't he be at the Research Institute?
Some experiments must rely on the underground laboratory of Northwestern University.
Michael glanced at her phone and slowly explained it to her.
He'll apply to be transferred back to the Institute when he's done. Although he's not a member of the laboratory, his workstation is here, so it's possible to transfer new people to him.
Bessy nodded in understanding and got up.
Where are you going?
Michael put the book on his lap, turning the page with his right hand. He grabbed her wrist with his left hand and pulled her back with a little force. Bessy wasn't in a rush and just lazily said, Tucker had a question to ask me.
Your brother.
Michael also looked up and took out his phone.
He tricked me yesterday.
He pointed his white fingers to the game sent by Tucker. He had failed at him twice. Bessy took his phone and clicked on the game Tucker had sent him to play. He had added a suicide bug halfway through the small program game. It was impossible to survive. Bessy sat upright, and then went downstairs to bring down her computer and started tapping on the keyboard. On the other side of town, at Zeke's studio, Tucker received a message from his sister. It was game software. Bessy used to send him games regularly, but after introducing Mr. Bright to him, she stopped. But now, she had sent him a mini-game. Immediately clicking on it, he sat up straight and played the game, but his character died right away. He froze for a moment. He exited and then opened it to play again. With a move of his finger, the game character died. He pursed his lips and opened it again and again. With every move, the game character died again. The manager, watching him die many times in succession, finally heaved a sigh of relief. Ever since he had played Tucker's game last time, he had started harboring doubts, and only now did he feel Tucker was normal. He leaned on the sofa and smiled.
So you can be a noob at games too.
Tucker was speechless. He quit the game. Outside the office, the assistant knocked on the door, brought in a courier package and handed it to the manager.
Your package.
The manager took it, surprised at how heavy it was.
I didn't buy anything. Zeke, is this yours?
Zeke was an artist, so the things he bought were usually sent to the studio or his own name. Turning over a script while sitting on the sofa, Zeke didn't look up.
No.
The manager looked down at the simple and clear express packaging. It didn't seem like a gift from a fan. Looking at the shape of the courier, the assistant leaned in and made a guess.
Isn't it a computer?
Hearing this, the manager suddenly remembered asking Bessy about the computer the other night. He had also transferred $1,000 to Zeke. Putting the package on the table, he laughed and tilted his head to look at Zeke, who was still flipping carefully through the script.
Your niece actually sent me a computer?
These days, news of Zeke's niece being on screen had spread on Twitter. Everyone in the studio knew of her existence and was very curious about her. When they heard that she had given a computer to the manager, they all gathered around and asked him to quickly open it.
What computer did his niece give you? She even sent it here directly. This computer must be extraordinary.
The manager hadn't planned on opening it now. He was also a game fan and had all kinds of computers, so he wasn't too curious about the one Bessy sent him. The computer was well packaged, and it was more convenient to take it home that way, but since the others were curious about what computer Bessy had sent him, he decided to satisfy their curiosity. He took out a pair of scissors. Everyone else in the studio put down what they were doing to gather around. The manager cut open the outer packaging. Glancing at the expectant faces, he couldn't help but chuckle.
It's just an ordinary computer. What else can it be? Don't overthink it.
The packaging was simple and casual. The black laptop peeked out the moment he opened it. The case was very thin. The manager's casual attitude paused, and he picked up this very light and thin computer to look at it further. The front and back were pure black, and its appearance alone was top-notch in the computer world. A few young girls in the studio who only cared about appearances immediately exclaimed, "It's so pretty!" The men urged the manager to quickly turn it on to try the functions. After sweeping the trash on the table aside, he placed the computer down, opened it, and it started by itself. A white 100-point progress bar flashed up on the black screen. The progress bar reached 100% in less than 3 seconds. A mechanical robot voice sounded. Episode 337. The Special Researcher. Please perform pupil verification. The manager stared at it sluggishly for about a minute. The mechanical voice repeated itself. Please perform pupil verification. Returning to his senses, he stared directly into the computer camera under everyone's watchful gazes. Verification successful. The computer automatically returned to the main page.
Pupil verification? It's so fast.
The manager's eyes lit up. The computer's response speed was as fast as the one Tucker had, and possibly even faster. The desktop was very clean, with only one icon in the shape of a maple leaf. An international search engine unique to the World Poker Tour was also there. A man in the office pointed to the icon and exclaimed,
"The Maple Leaf app market covers all the applications in the world. There are only those you don't know about, but none that you can't find. But other electronic products don't have this application market."
The girls stared at the international search engine and were also excited. The manager was over 30 years old and didn't know much about the market app or the search engines. But looking at how excited the others were, he guessed that it must be very useful.
"Sir, I have some software that I can't download."
A young man eagerly looked up at him.
"Let's see if your computer can download it. If it's possible, can you copy it to my phone?"
The manager was speechless, a little confused. He still took a step back and let the youngsters take over. As if they had discovered a novelty, the youngsters swarmed up around the computer.
"Fuck, it also has Austria's large-scale horror side tour? Wait, download my international dating software first."
"How could you shamelessly cut the line? Let's fight to the death in the arena tonight."
The
manager had originally prepared a hot cup of coffee for each of them for their overtime work to prepare for the show's release on Saturday. But at this moment, they didn't need it at all. As if they had been injected by adrenaline, they kept coming to him to see if their software could be downloaded. The coffee machine was basically unattended. They came to and fro, and the manager took his coffee and went to sit opposite Zeke. Watching this scene, the usually talkative manager was suddenly speechless. Last time, he remembered Bessy saying that the computer she gave Tucker was unavailable, and he'd had no plans of buying another computer. He wasn't interested in a computer that only cost $1,000. But he hadn't wanted to dash the girls' good intentions, and had just casually transferred the money to Zeke. $1,000 wasn't big money for him. He had only wanted to make Zeke's niece happy, and had no expectations. But who knew? Drinking a sip of coffee, he finally returned to his senses after a long time and faintly glanced at Zeke.
$1,000. It seems insufficient.
Instead of reading the script, Zeke put it aside and watched the crowd in the studio. He leaned on the sofa and pondered for a while.
"Just use it."
The manager nodded, but said,
"I don't really dare to."
Tucker sat at the side and blankly glanced at him.
"It's probably a thank you gift."
Zeke picked up the script again and looked down. The manager had done many things during the month of shooting in Hawaii. Upon hearing this, he also remembered how hard he had worked, and nodded. He hadn't expected Bessy to remember this, and his affection for Bessy rose by several inches.
"Then why don't you have one?"
If it was a thank you gift, Zeke had been much more meticulous in his care for Tucker. Zeke raised his chin, flipping through the script with his white fingertips. He pointed at him, coughed, and then lightly said,
"How could you compare to me?"
The manager was speechless. Yeah, they were a family. They weren't comparable. On Thursday, Bessy was walking across campus after class ended. She pulled up her navy blue scarf, covering the part of her face below her nose, showing only her dark, clear eyes. She looked rigorous and indifferent, and the fluffy scarf helped tone down the willfulness in her eyes. Tall and thin, the coat hugged her figure, and her legs were straight and long beneath it. Everyone who went past her would turn back to give her another look. In the past 2 days, she had gained more fans at Northwestern University, directly surpassing Luke, who had gone to the Research Institute last month. Sometimes, people even recognized her from behind. Bessy tugged on her scarf expressionlessly, thinking that Zeke's bucket coat was pretty good, and maybe she should customize one. She arrived at Dean Soup's office. When Bessy came in, Dean Soup put down the things he was working on and took out a laboratory access card from the drawer. Bessy's electronic portrait was printed on the back.
This is your access card. It can be used as a school card as well, but has higher authority. It can be used in both Northwestern University and the University of Chicago.
He handed the card to her and went to personally pour a cup of tea for her, giving her a warm welcome.
Sit.
Bessy took the card and sat down. She received the tea in its pure white disposable cup and politely thanked him. She glanced down at the card. On the front was a picture of the laboratory, with the words Science and Technology Laboratory written on the top in bold letters. Dean Soup sat in his office chair with his thermos cup and asked gently and elegantly,
The random assignment results of the Science and Technology Department have been released. Who are you with?
Entering the laboratory was very important for new students. The laboratory had researchers from levels 1 to 4. The level 1 researchers held a special position at the Research Institute and were called special researchers. They were basically first-class talents in the industry who had made major contributions at the academic level to earn this reputation. The level 2 researchers were mainly those who had written a series of research SCI papers that had been cited more than 500 times, whose new research results were recognized by the domestic and foreign scientific communities. Levels 3 and 4 didn't have as strict requirements. After reaching industry recognition in their academic work, they just needed to survive in the institute for a few years. The top scientific talents of America were gathered in the Research Institute. The higher the level of research, the more exposure to different researchers and perspectives. Pinching the disposable cup in her delicate fingers, Bessy said, Mr. Rostron, his profile says he's a special researcher. As the dean of the department, Dean Soup was more familiar with the up-and-comers in the academic world than ordinary people. There were only so many special researchers in the Research Institute. Upon hearing this, he paused.
You're talking about Caleb Roston?
Bessy took a sip of hot tea. The steam rose around her, making her face a little hazy. She calmly replied, I think so.
Your luck.
Dean Soup laughed.
Caleb is one of the 5 special researchers of the Institute. You're too lucky to have gotten him. Follow him well and be more proactive.
After exchanging a few more words, Bessy checked the time. Michael was probably downstairs, so she bid farewell to Dean Soup. Dean Soup smiled and sent her to the door. After she left, he stared at her back and muttered to himself,
She's our queen student for sure. She can even meet a special researcher that almost no freshman students can meet.
His assistant stood beside him, also paying homage to Bessy's back.
If Caleb accepts Bessy as a student, then her path will be even more magnanimous than that of Luke.
Dean Soup suddenly sighed.
But it's not easy for a special researcher to accept a student.
Special researchers themselves were research madmen. Standing at the top of their professional fields, they were geniuses among geniuses. The 5 special researchers at the Institute all had strange tempers and rarely interacted with students, let alone accepting them as an apprentice. Dean Soup had only casually mentioned this. He didn't really think that Caleb would accept Bessy as his apprentice. Once Bessy left Dean Soup's office, she saw Michael's car parked not far away. Hooking her fingers in her scarf, she walked towards the car. It was only a minute away, so she didn't actually wear her scarf. But she had only taken 2 steps forward when a tall boy stopped in front of her. Holding a basketball, he stared at Bessy. His handsome face flushed, and his voice agitated.
You're Bessy from the first-year Science and Technology Department's computer science class, right? Hello, I'm...
Bessy took a step back and lazily looked up. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on her face, making her look bright and arrogant. Her tone was simple and concise. I'm not. You found the wrong person. She was cold and impatient. Turning, she directly walked towards Michael's car. Others on the sidewalk had already recognized her. Maybe it was because she was too sharp, but they only dared to look at her from a distance and not approach her. She got into the car and closed the door of the passenger seat with a bang. The sound was rather loud. Sitting in the driver's seat, Michael placed his arms on the steering wheel and glanced at her sideways. Originally, he had looked at the boy with displeasure, but he couldn't help but laugh after seeing her cold and impatient expression. Bessy lowered her head and took out her phone. She opened the Northwestern University forum for the first time. She wanted to delete the posts with her photo from the forum, but scrolling through it, she found no pictures. She leaned against the car door.
It's not on the forum.
Michael stopped laughing and rested his fingers on the steering wheel. He lowered his eyebrows and calmly glanced at her.
Ask your dean if he has posted your picture on the bulletin board.
Bessy was speechless. She seldom went to the Science and Technology Department's office and had never thought of this happening. Michael slowly pulled the car out onto the road, smirking slightly. Her face and the sharpness in it couldn't be concealed. Even through the camera lens, they were so easy to recognize. She closed the mobile forum page just as she received a call from Zeke's manager. Answering the call, she leaned against the car window and squinted. Hello? Her voice was casual. Episode 338. A blood-red jeweled bracelet.
Miss Miller, I called to thank you for the computer you gave me. It's very good.
The manager straightened up subconsciously as he spoke. He hadn't said that he bought it from Bessy. After all, he was afraid $1,000 wasn't enough to buy even just the display screen of such a computer. You're welcome. Bessy put her hand on the car window, her tone unhurried. Already accustomed to her manner, the manager didn't feel neglected and even felt a little flattered. Bessy had this kind of personality, and he could tell this was her showing a good mood.
The production crew just called me. The program will be broadcasted the day after tomorrow. Are you sure you won't open a Twitter account? Open one and I can manage it for you.
The manager asked again. Taking out her earphones, Bessy just raised an eyebrow. No need. Anything else?
No.
The manager took the hint and said goodbye. Back at Zeke's studio, he hung up. Then he contacted the director again and took a sip of water from the drinking fountain.
I've asked her for the second time, but she's unwilling. She'll flare up if I ask again.
The director was very regretful.
Why do you want her to open a Twitter account?
Although the manager also wanted her to, he didn't feel the need to insist if she was reluctant. Why was the director so persistent?
She'll definitely shoot to fame after the broadcast. And the violin.
The director thought of how Bessy had obtained 4 high-level clues that day and had shown her character despite having no character set up for her. He vaguely said,
You'll understand when you see it.
He was about to hang up.
Wait.
The manager felt like he should confirm the editing again.
Nothing has gone wrong with your program, right? Mr. Miller asked you do not edit too much, but just make it a little more appropriate.
Bessy could be irritating, so Zeke was worried that the editing of the show would make netizens curse her, thinking that the show had set up a character for her.
Don't worry, we've obtained President Soup's approval beforehand.
The director replied. Robert knew Bessy and wouldn't do anything to harm her, so the manager was relieved. Bessy and Michael returned to the Highline apartments. Joshua was sitting on the sofa in the living room. Changing his shoes and throwing the keys onto the coffee table, Michael glanced at Joshua, who was sitting upright and calmly drinking tea. Somewhat succumbing to him, he sighed.
Is the Clark family so idle these days?
Rosemary was also always around this place these days. Joshua stared at him with a scowl.
I'm here to give Bessy a gift.
Simons took out a simple small box from behind him. After Bessy's assessment, Rosemary had vividly described it to Simons after returning to the Clark family's house and had also shown him the S-card Bessy gave her. Busy with the Clark family's forces recently, Joshua hadn't had time to see Bessy until today. He had gone to his private collection to pick a gift for her. Bessy took off her coat, hung up her scarf, and looked at the box Simons handed over. Holding her phone, she subconsciously looked up hesitantly. She didn't take the gift. Behind her, a white and slender hand reached out to take the box from Simons. Bessy looked up. Holding the box in one hand and her right hand in the other, Michael's long figure was slightly bent. He clasped her hand in his and handed her the simple box, his tone gentle.
Take it. He's not short of money.
Sitting straight as a ramrod, Joshua glanced at him silently because of this. She took the box after thinking about it and took it upstairs without seeing what was inside. Tonight, the chef prepared impressive dishes for Joshua and Simons. In a good mood, Joshua even brought some wine over for a few drinks.
You came back so early today. Haven't you entered the laboratory?
Joshua picked up his wine glass and casually chatted with her. She replied while slowly eating. Not yet. I just got the access card today. Joshua took a sip of wine.
The researcher you're with will probably contact you tomorrow. Generally, when you enter the laboratory, you'll have to deal with a lot of experiments, and won't have much time to come home.
Michael finished eating and casually put down his fork. Upon hearing this, he leaned back in his chair, tapping the table with his slender fingertips. He stared at him with cold, unhappy eyes. After Joshua finished eating, he was driven back to the Clark family's house by Marvin. Upstairs, Bessy had already taken a shower and changed into her pajamas. She squeezed her hair with the towel with one hand and turned on her computer with the other. She had already requested to add Caleb's social account last night and only opened it to see that he had yet to contact her. He must be very busy as a special researcher, so she wasn't very bothered and simply requested it again. Someone knocked unhurriedly on the door. When her hair was almost dry, she put the towel aside and opened the door to see Michael leaning against the doorframe. Not surprised, she turned to let him in before closing the door. Michael came in and saw the box on the table. Leaning against the table, he bent his long legs and casually said,
You haven't opened my dad's gift?
Not yet. Bessy opened her closet door, found her backpack and threw it onto her bed.
Come.
Michael opened the box. He raised an eyebrow and waved to her, saying slowly,
He gave you something from his private collection.
Bessy walked over to take a look. There was a blood-red jeweled bracelet in the box. The body of the bracelet was delicate and transparent, dense and smooth, and pure in color. The box itself was a little old and seemed to glow with an aura reflected by the red jewels. Bessy had never studied jewelry and didn't know much about it. She just thought it looked good. Michael picked it up and examined it. Seemingly quite satisfied with it, he took Bessy's left hand, leaned forward with his long figure, and lowered his eyes to put the blood-red bracelet on her hand. The color of the blood-red bracelet was pure red, as if ice had been dyed. It contrasted against her thin and white wrist, looking extremely distinguished, as if her wrist was enveloped in a layer of light. He reached out to draw her close, smiling.
It suits you very well.
At the same time, a figure was working in a room 3 floors underground, at the end of the corridor of the B317 laboratory. This laboratory was very close to the nuclear reaction fuel spilled from the Northwestern University underground area. Because of this natural geographical advantage, many teachers from the Research Institute came here to do research. The majestic laboratory was extremely cold. Only this figure was inside. A tall woman wearing a white protective suit came in from outside and walked over to the figure. She handed him a document. Mr. Rostron, this is the student drawn for you from the assessment this year. Here is her document.
A new student?
Caleb was about 40 years old, but the years had not left many marks on his face. He wore glasses with gold rims that balanced on the bridge of his nose. Wrinkling his brows slightly upon hearing this, he was quite surprised to be selected after coming here to do his experiment. He simply nodded.
I see.
The tall woman handed him the document. Taking it, Caleb opened the drawer beside him and put it in without looking through it. The next day was Friday. After class, Bessy wanted to go to the laboratory. She took out her phone and checked her message to Caleb, but he still had not accepted her request. At noon, she went to the 3rd floor of Northwestern University's cafeteria. This canteen was the most expensive at Northwestern University, so not many people came here usually. Bessy bought a meal and found a corner to sit down. Jerome saw her from the crowd and came to sit across from her.
Hello, new student,
he said. Looking up at him, she politely greeted him, her eyebrows clear. Senior. She was more patient with him since he was Luke's friend.
You remind me of Luke. That guy did the S-level experiment, but you're even better. Not only did you do the S-level experiment, but you also did all the other experiments.
Jerome ate a piece of pork. All the seniors were discussing Bessy's achievements. The fact that she had caught up to the University of Chicago's score with a gap of 4 people had spread among the seniors. Seeing Bessy, Jerome couldn't help but pay homage to her again. This duo was not human. He looked at her and asked,
"By the way, which floor is your laboratory on? I'm on the 1st floor. Come to me if you have any questions."
The main place of activity for each new student was in the research room under their researcher's name. If they wanted to apply for their own laboratory, they would have to achieve a certain level of achievement or write a few SCI papers that were recognized at home and abroad. If the impact factor was large enough, they could get the laboratory to approve a personal laboratory for them. Mr. Rostron hasn't replied to me yet. Speaking of this, Bessy paused, tapping the fork with her bony fingers. She looked up at Jerome. "When did you enter the laboratory last time?"
"You can call your teacher."
Jerome smiled.
"Under normal circumstances, the teachers in the institute are like a bunch of lunatics. They don't care about the world's matters, let alone those social accounts. I called my professor directly. Judging from this, I'm guessing that your teacher is a scholar."
Jerome wasn't Dean Soup and didn't know much about the institute. He pondered for a while and said,
"He's probably a senior researcher. You should try to get him to accept you as a student."
Bessy lowered her eyes slightly. She thought about it for a minute and realized that the system had only given her a social account without a phone number. But today was Friday and she had the weekends off, so she didn't ask further. She didn't listen carefully to what Jerome said and wasn't very concerned. She hadn't entered the laboratory to find a teacher. On Friday, she neither received a reply from Caleb nor had her friend request approved. Episode 339. The first episode. Marvin went to her room in the morning on Saturday. He took out the plants in her room and told her,
"Miss Miller, 24-Hour Idol will be broadcast tonight. Michael has already prepared a big screen downstairs."
Bessy went downstairs with a lack of interest and said a little casually, "Oh." She poured a glass of water for herself and leaned against the water dispenser. She had woken up too early and Michael had yet to return from his morning run. After moving the flower pot and watering it, Marvin put down the watering can, went to wash his hands in the bathroom, and returned to Bessy.
"Miss Miller, do you want to go downstairs to see the big screen Michael prepared?"
After finishing the water, she thought about it, took a piece of bread and went downstairs with him. Michael had installed a big screen in Patrick's house downstairs. Marvin had been very moved at first, but Michael had said it was because installing it upstairs would be too noisy.
"This is the big screen."
Marvin walked to the hall and pointed to her. Taking a bite of the bread, Bessy leaned casually against the wall, looking it up and down absent-mindedly. A 6-foot-long and 3-foot-wide crystal screen hung on the wall. A long row of sofas sat opposite. Melon and fruit teas were also placed by the sofa. Everything was available. Patrick had just woken up and come out holding a towel, only to see Bessy standing there. He stopped immediately, his voice rigorous, and took a step back.
"Miss Miller,"
he said very strictly. Bessy casually greeted him after finishing the piece of bread. Then she slowly walked upstairs. After she left, Patrick heaved a sigh of relief. He glanced at Marvin, frowned, and said in a deep voice,
"Why did you bring Miss Miller down so early in the morning?"
Fortunately, it was winter and he was dressed neatly. If it was summer...
"I let Miss Miller see the big screen,"
Marvin blankly replied.
"We're going to watch TV tonight."
He glanced at Patrick.
"Are you going to watch?"
"Watch what?" Patrick continued drying his head with a towel, then went to the changing room to put on his clothes.
"Miss Miller participated in a show called 24-Hour Idol."
Closing the door, Patrick was obviously disinterested.
"You girls can watch. I'm not going to."
Marvin was speechless. Other than the Highline Apartments as well as Rosemary's apartment, the Clark family's house and Zeke's studio, countless other households were waiting in front of their screens for 24 Idol to start broadcasting. This wasn't only Zeke's first reality show, but also his niece's first appearance. Besides some of Zeke's fans, a large proportion of people wanted to see his niece, and some casual fans also wanted to watch the show. Ricky was in Tucker's room at the Park Place Apartments that night, watching him program. After watching for a long while, he withdrew, turned to Jack outside and solemnly lowered his voice.
"Is there new information on the teacher that Zeke is inviting for Tucker?"
In the 1 week since Tucker returned, Ricky and the others had already witnessed his terrifying talent.
It's easy to find a good teacher, but the problem is avoiding the fourth son.
Jack sighed. With the Miller family's current state, most of Zeke's connections were in the entertainment industry, so it was too difficult to find a famous teacher for Tucker. Ricky glanced at Tucker's room, his eyes sinking.
Tucker is indeed a member of the Miller family. His talent in computing is too high, and he almost broke through my firewall. Now he's trying the code I taught him. I hope we can find a teacher for him as soon as possible.
These days, Jack had heard Ricky and the others talk about Tucker. The two of them were talking. Suddenly, putting down the files in his hand, James pushed out his chair and stood up. He found the remote control and turned on the TV hanging on the opposite wall.
James?
Jack glanced at him. James turned and replied to him.
I'm going to watch TV.
Just as he finished speaking, someone knocked on the door. Jack walked towards the door, hesitant to see who would come to see James at this late hour. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Zeke's slender figure. He walked inside while pulling down his mask and greeted Jack.
Zeke, why are you here now?
Jack stepped aside and closed the door. Zeke tucked his mask into his pocket and saw James setting up the TV. He found a place to sit and slowly said,
To watch TV.
It was now 7:55 p.m., close to 8 p.m. Tucker also put down the programming work in his hand and trotted over. He sat down obediently beside Zeke, staring at the TV. Tucker was watching TV as well? Jack only then remembered that 24-Hour Idol was broadcasting at this time today. Ricky picked up his jacket and greeted Zeke and the others. He was about to leave, but glanced at Tucker with gentle eyes.
Tucker, aren't you going to finish the coding?
Tucker expressionlessly shook his head.
I'm going to watch my sister first.
Ricky was taken aback. Jack laughed and explained to him that Bessy had taken Tucker's place in the show for 2 days. James took out a pot of tea and a bunch of snacks before enthusiastically asking,
Mr. Marino, do you want to stay and watch?
Ricky quickly waved his hand.
No, I'm going back to examine the project.
He only had data on his mind. Now that the Miller family was rejuvenated, he was a lot more motivated than anyone else. Once Ricky left, Jack closed the door. It was already 8 p.m. and the TV was playing the last commercial before the show started.
Sit.
Zeke glanced at him and pointed to the empty seat on the couch. Jack also paid attention to this show and naturally knew that Zeke had come so late just to watch Bessy. Both James and Tucker were there too. Jack fell silent for a moment. Ricky's words just now had shocked him a lot. He was now anxious about Tucker's teacher, wanting to ask Zeke if he had found anyone, and wasn't in the mood to watch TV. However, Zeke and Tucker were staring fixedly at the TV. Not wanting to disturb them, Jack also sat beside them and watched the TV. Thanks to Zeke's fame, 24-Hour Idol was very popular online. At 8:01 p.m., the major video apps and TV channels all broadcast it simultaneously. The upper half of the video began to scroll through the real-time comments. Zeke glanced at it and didn't turn it off. Because Tucker had been injured halfway through the first episode, Bessy replaced him. The camera slowly moved from Katie waking up to Zeke, who insisted on waking up his niece in person. As the camera aimed at Bessy's room, the real-time comments started getting excited. Ugh, Zeke is so handsome. I feel like the directing team is very reluctant to film his niece. I hope her appearance won't be too awkward.
It'll definitely be awkward. Why did Zeke suddenly have a niece? According to the news in the entertainment industry, he just recognized this niece. I think she's gone crazy, wanting to become famous, right? I hope she won't bring hate to our movie star.
Am I the only one wondering if his niece has inherited his family's good genes? I wonder what she looks like.
I have a hunch that Zeke's character setup will collapse with the appearance of his niece.
Oh my god, he just recognized her. Hugs to your niece, we love you. While the comments clamored fiercely, the scene had already switched to Bessy's face. Anyone watching the live broadcast could see the real-time comments decreased by half, spammed with "ah." A lot of people became fans of her instead. Katie and her cousin were very humorous on the show, but when the scenes of Bessy carrying a piece of wood alone was shown, the real-time comments went wild. The comment section was densely filled with question marks of various colors. In particular, the camera showed a close-up of the wood, clearly showing the sawdust on it. Bessy casually put it onto the ground, releasing a bunch of dust. The cameraman turned to Zeke and Katie's cousin, who were both trying to lift the wood, and a meme of a man with a questioning expression popped up on the screen. There was another frenzy of ha-has in the comment section. People at first said that Bessy had faked it, or that the piece of wood was fake. Now these people were instantly speechless. At the same time in the Highline Apartments, Patrick saw this scene. He was leaning against the sofa to watch the show, and he felt his legs slowly weaken. He almost knelt on the ground. Blankly glancing at him, Marvin bit into a potato chip.
"Are you okay?"
After asking, he took another bite of the potato chip. Rosemary was watching at home. She took a piece of tissue and stiffly wiped the water she had accidentally sprayed on the table, in a daze. At the Park Place Apartments, James blinked several times, then grabbed Zeke to ask him several questions before he believed that Bessy wasn't faking it and hadn't been edited at all. He grabbed a melon seed in a daze and ate without thinking. Sierra's physics question wasn't cut out either. Bessy solved the question too quickly, and the camera didn't manage to capture where she was looking.
"Although I like this girl, isn't it a bit fake? She has a script, right? I think Sierra and that physics teacher both received instructions from the production crew."
Someone in the comments section only shouted, "Kneeling." Some people began to doubt the authenticity of the show. Finally, Zeke said that she was from Northwestern University's Science and Technology Department.
"What the fuck? A Northwestern University school nerd?"
Wait, not everyone from Northwestern University Science and Technology Department is like that. I couldn't tell what was wrong either. Several people believed her, but some didn't, and even became anti-fans. As for the Babylonian weekday system and Morse code hexadecimal, even the viewers were at a loss. Someone came back from searching online and directly worshipped this young girl.
"She was definitely given a script deliberately by the show crew. I have a hunch that Zeke's niece will enter the entertainment industry next. This variety show was probably to promote her. It's a pity they couldn't grasp the scale well and went too far. I can't believe it."
Smiley face. Many other people thought so too, until the last password scene for the hidden 6th level Rubik's Cube. Episode 340. Fans Go Crazy. At that time, Zeke, Katie, and everyone else had yet to notice the process of Bessy solving the Rubik's Cube, but the camera managed to capture it. Her hand speed was so fast, it seemed like after images appeared in the camera. While half sitting on the table, she casually played with the Rubik's Cube and listened to Katie and the others. From the beginning to end, she never looked down at the 6th level Rubik's Cube, and it completely turned into a trick toy in her hands.
"Have you noticed that when she played the Rubik's Cube, Katie and the others were still talking behind? Their movements haven't been sped up, so it seems like the production group broadcasted it normally?"
Let me say something. Look at her expression. She's not even looking at the Rubik's Cube, yet she's still doing it with such ease. This probably isn't her maximum speed. The comments were all descriptions of what Bessy was doing. Many people found something negative and said that Bessy was putting on a show and that the production crew was shady. But the Rubik's Cube, there was nothing to pick on, nor any shadiness found. The first episode stopped after that scene. At the end of the broadcast, the director asked Zeke to ask 2 friends to come, but because of Sierra, it became Bessy's job. Question mark, question mark, question mark? What does Bessy mean?
Is the production crew serious?
Smiley face,
waiting for Bessy's friend. What friends can she invite? Can't she tell the director wants to make use of Zeke's connections?
Fans of Zeke, just focus on him and his niece. Don't be distracted by other celebrities. While the fans spammed question marks, the broadcast changed to a preview. The preview started with, "On the next episode of 24-Hour Idol." Only one shot of Bessy's friend's arrival was shown, but it was so exciting that they couldn't control themselves.
"Fuck, who came? I'm so curious."
The program ended and 4 hot searches occupied the hot search list at the same time. Zeke Miller's niece, the Miller family's beauty, 24-Hour Idol, and 24-Hour Idol is shady. At the Park Place Apartments, Jack was originally surprised, but managed to calm down as the episode went on. He took a cup of tea and glanced at Zeke.
"I didn't expect you to promote Miss Miller so much. But is it okay to make such a character set up for her? People will curse the 2 of you."
The Rubik's Cube and the violin were strange too. If she really managed that, just how smart was she? Having followed Zeke, Jack had been influenced by the entertainment industry and also knew a lot about it. He clearly remembered that the industry liked to create character setups for people. Hence, he subconsciously believed that Zeke had arranged this character setup for Bessy.
There wasn't any script.
Instead of glancing at Jack, he stood up directly, his handsome face stained with frost, and his eyes gloomy. He took out his phone and was about to make a call, but his phone rang with a call from the manager. He had known something was wrong after watching the live broadcast and had immediately called.
You didn't confirm with the director and tell him not to edit it according to the real situation?
Zeke's eyes were dark, and his low voice was laced with rare anger. The manager was getting dressed and preparing to go to the studio.
I did. They said the content was already played under the supervision of President Soup, so I wasn't too concerned about it. Where are you now? I've notified the studio people to come back. We'll work overtime and discuss countermeasures.
Zeke hung up. It was as though all the air went out of the room. Unless experienced personally during the production, outsiders would find it hard to believe Bessy's achievements, let alone those watching the show. This was exactly the case with the haters. She cracked the password in such a short time. This wasn't within the scope of normal people. Conclusion? It was all fake. They would believe it if they were celebrities, but in their eyes, the real school nerd with the godlike super memory and super calculation ability was fake. Because their own brains couldn't reach such a height. Zeke had anticipated this when the show was recorded and had personally told the show's team to pay more attention to the editing. He hadn't wanted them to make it too mythical. He had even reminded the manager several times after returning to Evanston. After all, Bessy was so familiar with Robert, and Zeke felt like the director was very discerning. But even without him, they wouldn't want to offend Robert and Bessy. Hence, he hadn't checked it personally. Who knew that the director would really dare to edit like this? Haters had already appeared in the comment section. If they were left alone, netizens would really slander Bessy. Pursing his lips, Zeke picked up the jacket that he had set aside and opened the door. He even forgot to bid farewell to James as he left and closed the door. Jack was stunned for a long while before he slowly returned to his senses. He turned to James and Tucker in a daze.
Just now, what did Zeke mean by not using a script?
James didn't understand what Zeke had said to the manager, but he understood what he meant by not using the script. While sitting on the sofa, he put down the melon seed shell in his hand and looked honestly at Jack.
He said that the show was real and the directing team didn't arrange anything for Bessy.
No arrangement? No script? So Bessy had come up with the cumbersome codes for the escape route in the first episode of the program? Even the section of the violin song? How did she play such a difficult composition without even using a sheet of paper? How meticulous were her thoughts? How broad was her knowledge? Jack only knew that she was from Northwestern University's Science and Technology Department, and had not realized until this point just how far she was from his understanding. He stared at James and Tucker in a daze, and realized that the two of them were very calm. They weren't in the slightest bit surprised at Zeke's words, and seemed to be accustomed to them. Jack sat on the sofa in a daze, his head still buzzing. After realizing that Bessy was like this, he couldn't recover after a long time. Zeke drove the car to the studio. He pushed the door open. The studio staff had just arrived and turned the heat on, so the whole studio was still warming up. As soon as he opened the door, a gush of cold wind blew in.
Netizens have already started spamming.
The manager massaged his temples.
But we have it under control.
The role of Zeke's team couldn't be understated in his accomplishments throughout his career. His public relations were among the best in the entire entertainment industry. The current situation was under the domain of public relations. He was afraid someone would mess it up at this juncture. Zeke had almost no scandals in the industry, and many people were jealous of his standing on the top of the pyramid in the film and television industry. Things would blow up if any of those people wanted to make use of this situation. Bessy was a bug in the program and was too inconsistent with ordinary people's perception, so the majority of people actually believed the program was fake. It wasn't easy to find evidence for this kind of thing either. What could they do? Bring those who didn't believe in Bessy to let them personally experience it? The temperature in the studio gradually rose. The public relations worked overtime like crazy, writing responses, deleting comments, and controlling the conversation. Zeke directly called the director as he took another cigarette from his pocket.
Mr. Miller, are you looking for me regarding the show? I didn't expect it to be like this.
The director rubbed his temple.
Before we aired, the program review was conducted by President Soup himself. President Soup?
Zeke lit the cigarette and frowned upon hearing this. What was going on with Robert? Was he taking revenge on Bessy? This made no sense.
Your side is controlling the public opinion on Twitter. I just checked the major trends. You've dealt with it promptly.
The director had also checked the internet and found that several hot searches were deleted, and the topic's popularity was dropping.
Perhaps it'll be fine by tomorrow morning. Don't think too much about it. When the next episode is broadcast, those haters will naturally disappear.
Many things in the next episode couldn't be faked, especially Toby and Noah's popularity and the fact that Bessy had logged into her game account to play the game, which wasn't something the production crew set up. After bearing it for a week, the effect of the reversal would be apparent. The director had also anticipated the current situation and had expected the second episode to completely cover the first episode. Thus, when Robert had agreed to broadcast this episode, he hadn't thought much about it and finalized this version. This version was the most authentic, and the director hadn't changed it much. Zeke rubbed his forehead and hung up. Biting his cigarette, the smoke rose as he played with his phone. Finally, he called Bessy, who picked up after a few minutes.
Bessy.
He put the phone to his ear, his voice as usual as the smoke enveloped his eyebrows.
Are you sleeping?
Not yet. I just finished a call with my old roommate. In the Highline Apartments, Bessy held her phone in one hand and opened the door with the other, looking lazy. She was talking about Kara. Kara was Zeke's fanatical fan and naturally followed his first reality show appearance. After watching the show in the dormitory, she had called Bessy and exploded with questions for nearly 10 minutes. As soon as she hung up, Zeke had called. Bessy's voice was always flat and straightforward, without any emotional fluctuations. Pinching the cigarette with his fingers, Zeke was uncertain if she knew about the online events. After indirectly asking a few questions, he finally determined that she wasn't affected. Feeling reassured, he hung up the call. He put out the cigarette and looked at the people still working overtime in the studio.
Thank you, everyone. I'll treat you all to dinner when this matter is over.
Episode 341, Northwestern University's Queen. At the same time, the fourth son was in the Miller family's old house where he stayed these days. His subordinates were reporting Zeke's affairs to him. These past few days, Jack's side had kept moving. Even after searching for a long time, the fourth son still couldn't find out who was the one who helped Jack decode the program, so he had sent someone to keep an eye on him. Although the Miller family was already under his control, he still felt vaguely uneasy because Jack had retrieved the only remaining direct bloodline. He knew that the Miller family wouldn't last for many years if they relied on Jack. The only reason why Jack had persisted on and found a decoder for the program was because of Zeke's existence. There wasn't a day that passed that he didn't regard Zeke as the thorn in his side. However, Zeke had never left any usable information against him. Not only that, but he was still successful in the entertainment industry and had made many connections. Closing the file in his hand, the fourth son's eyes were cold.
Bessy is the old man's granddaughter?
Yes, the subordinate replied. The fourth son placed his hands on the table and sneered.
She was hidden so well.
If it hadn't been exposed on the internet today, even he wouldn't have found her. Thinking of something, the subordinate glanced at him hesitantly. The fourth son looked up and noticed the glance.
Go on,
he said.
When our men were following James, we found another woman.
The subordinate lowered his head, looking puzzled.
It seems like James has another daughter.
The fourth son stood up, feeling puzzled.
Look it up for me. I want to know what Zeke has hidden from me.
Sierra had previously been very popular. However, the Soup Corporation terminated their contract with her after the show. There were no secrets in the entertainment industry, and the other companies didn't dare to sign a contract with her after the Soup Corporation dropped her. Sierra moved out of the Soup Corporation's housing after returning from Hawaii. Fortunately, she had garnered several loyal fans by this point. In the first episode of 24-Hour Idol, Sierra was the funniest from beginning to end. The netizens laughed at her for solving the question even without recognizing that the question was wrong. An account called Wish You a Cool Breeze was the president of Sierra's fan support club. After watching this episode, she was completely shaken and wanted to abandon Sierra. But in the end, she also suspected Bessy had been given a script by the production crew, much like the other netizens. Especially since the hot search trends disappeared one by one, and by 3 o'clock, not one was left. Her suspicion grew from 30% to 70%. She sent a message to Sierra. Did the production crew force you to help her set up her character? Sierra followed the fan support account on Twitter. She naturally saw her message and clicked to read it. The program broadcast had a great impact on Sierra. She had answered the question without knowing it was wrong, and the production crew had even given it to her. It was obvious that she was the one who had gotten the character set up. She pursed her lips. She hadn't expected the netizens to be focused on Bessy without easing up, because her performance seemed to defy nature. Every netizen's attention was focused on her. Seeing this message, Sierra's eyes lit up, and she sent a reply to her. Yes. This single word sounded so aggrieved to Wish You a Cool Breeze. Anger bubbled in her. She watched the program's episode again. She spent all night working on a Twitter thread. Finally, she posted it. Regarding this idol show, I just have 3 questions. 1. For the first physics question, she didn't even look at it from beginning to end, which was also pointed out by Katie's cousin in the show. So, how did she know that there was no correct answer and the question was wrong? 2. She said she's from Northwestern University's Science and Technology department. Do these people study the Babylonian literature? Can they tell the weak system at a glance? Video screenshot. 3. The most ridiculous thing is the scene with the violins. Is there anyone who can copy the music composition after hearing these 2 songs? Without using any paper, she can even conjure the notes out of thin air and can even find the 2 overlapping points. I'm afraid she must be a musical genius. Video screenshot. All in all, I think it's seriously disgusting how they pulled another actress off the show just to promote someone. And let's not talk about how she's a school nerd from Northwestern University. The production crew shouldn't highlight that they're scared of Northwestern University's school nerds now and bring haters to them. The people I know from Northwestern University aren't like this. Smiley face. The show was broadcast on Saturday night. When Wish You a Cool Breeze posted on Twitter at 5 in the morning, most people were still asleep. As the president of Sierra's fan support club, she also had followers. Her Twitter post became popular as soon as it was posted. The traffic increased sharply at 7 a.m. 24-Hour Idol had completely exploded on the internet because of Zeke. So many people searched about it. The analysis of the production crew's script from Wish You a Cool Breeze was well documented and even showed screenshots as evidence. This Twitter post quickly rose to the hot search. Some people commented on this post to comfort Sierra. I scolded you in the comments last night. Let me apologize to you here. This actress with the last name M eats too ugly. She can't even set up her character properly. I'll bet $1 million that she just wants to shoot to fame in the entertainment circle.
I already said that Sierra is a simple girl. How could she collapse like that in the show? Production crew, please be more humane.
When Sierra woke up and opened her Twitter, she realized she had gained tens of thousands of followers. Many people even sent her private messages to comfort and apologize to her. She clicked on the post from Wish You a Cool Breeze. After avoiding her for so long, her manager called her for the first time and instructed her.
Your fans have done a great job. They'll help you clear your name and return to the path of fame. If this continues, we can still receive non-biased advertisements. Don't participate in this matter anymore. Zeke Miller and the Soup Corporation aren't good to provoke.
Sierra hung up. She stared at her rising follower count. Then looked at Ava's Twitter, which was nearing 7 million fans. She wasn't reconciled with this tiny gain. Since last night, the Soup Corporation hadn't issued a statement yet. The production crew's broadcast yesterday was obviously a trick for Bessy to bring hatred to her, and they dared to broadcast it this way. Hadn't President Soup instructed them to broadcast it this way? Sierra's eyes flickered, and she got up from her seat, staring out the narrow window. She was left with almost nothing now. After a long while, she posted on Twitter, "Thank you, everyone." This post was equivalent to her silently acknowledging the production crew's operation. It instantly brought a huge number of fans for her. Countless comments were comforting her. Her post instantly brought the production crew into a conspiracy theory, and the matter was blown up further. At the same time, Zeke arrived at the Park Place apartments. He had come over early in the morning after hearing that Bessy would be there for lunch at noon. Bessy arrived at 8 o'clock. Glancing behind her, James didn't see Michael and couldn't help but ask, "Michael isn't here?" His father told him to come home to eat. Bessy pulled off her scarf and lazily sat down on the sofa. Zeke slowly drank his tea and greeted her, feeling relieved that she wasn't affected by the mess on the internet. Jack brought a pot of tea from the kitchen. He paused at the sight of Bessy at the kitchen door, but she didn't notice his strange reaction. She sat on the sofa and rested for a while before entering Tucker's room with her phone. Tucker also heard her coming and had just opened the door and poked his head out. Bessy went in and casually kicked the door shut behind her. She glanced at his computer. "No one is teaching you now?" "Uncle Jack is still looking for someone." Tucker pulled out his chair and sat down. Nodding thoughtfully, Bessy sat beside him and flipped through the books he was reading. "Tell me after you finish reading the foundation books. I'll give you an upgraded version." Tucker nodded. "I've almost finished it." "Okay." Bessy rubbed her chin and casually thought about the upgraded book. They talked all day long. Zeke and James were already accustomed to this sort of thing. After Bessy had closed the door, Zeke's expression immediately became grave. While sitting at the table, the phone in his hand suddenly rang. It was his manager.
"Have you seen Twitter?"
The manager was smoking a cigarette. Putting the phone to his ear and sneering, Zeke was no longer gentle and calm, and his voice was a little mocking.
"What do you think?" "I guess you have, but why bother being angry with a joker? How is Bessy?"
The manager knew that Zeke would be furious about Sierra's post based on his affection for his niece. Zeke's tone slightly improved at the mention of Bessy. He took out a cigarette and said,
"She doesn't seem to gossip much and hasn't read Twitter after the show's broadcast."
The manager paused, shook his head and laughed.
"She's so unflappable, she doesn't even care about the reaction of such a popular show."
Bessy's reaction wasn't surprising to the manager at all. After all, she was someone who didn't want to open a Twitter account or gain any fans.
"Ultimately, it's better that the directing team didn't edit it," he consoled Zeke. "The director said to endure it until next week."
Zeke's public relations team was dealing with the Twitter post from Wish You a Cool Breeze, making sure it didn't blow up too much. Otherwise, it would cause a lot of ripples in the entertainment industry. Zeke reluctantly agreed. Hearing this discussion, Jack squinted his aging eyes and sat down next to Zeke to read the news they were discussing. His face flushed with anger.
"Why are these people like this?"
Episode 342, National Top Scorer. Hanging up, Zeke stood up, sounding much calmer.
"This is how it is online."
"Then we're just letting them be?"
Jack couldn't suppress his anger. Zeke nodded casually. He was about to turn off his phone and go to Tucker's room when he saw a notification pop up. It was an alert for the most popular recent posts. The top one was Sierra's tweet. "Thank you, everyone." She had successfully brought things to the forefront again with this post. Zeke stopped and sat down again. Staring down at this post, he paused for a long time before laughing mockingly. Then, he directly went to his call log and called the director again. Back at Northwestern University, Kara was excited all night and woke up at 9 o'clock. Instead of getting up, she laid on her side under the blanket. Flicking through Zeke's Twitter, she suddenly felt like something was wrong. She followed the clues of all netizens to the hot search. After a while, she found the post from Wish You a Cool Breeze, which listed the 3 crimes. Frowning, she closed Twitter and called the student union's president. "President, who handles the official Twitter?" She sat up suddenly, scratching her head. The student union's president knew that Kara knew Luke and Bessy and took special care of her. "Your department does. What's wrong?" "There's indeed something wrong." Kara slightly narrowed her eyes. "President, I'll tell you in detail later. I have to find our department head first." Because of Mary and the rest of her group, Kara was rather popular in the office now. The office staff didn't ask much after hearing that she wanted to use Northwestern University's official account and simply sent her the account number and password. Kara logged out of her Twitter account and logged into Northwestern University's official Twitter account. From the hot search, she clicked on the Twitter post, "Wish you a cool breeze." Her 3 crimes post had already received 70,000 comments and was still on the rise. She had spent all night sorting out her accusations against the production group. She posted a screenshot of Katie's cousin saying that Bessy hadn't even looked up the physics question, and also showed a series of similar pictures showing how Bessy couldn't have figured it out under such conditions. After enumerating these, she put a screenshot of the production crew's caption, "Fear of domination by Northwestern University.jpg," on Bessy's head. The screenshot was highly provocative in the 3 crimes comment area. Her replies to the comments were also full of mockery for Bessy and the crew. Northwestern University school tyrants have expressed their unwillingness to take the blame. What did the Northwestern University school tyrants do wrong to deserve the hate? Ha 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 ha. It's my first time seeing someone ruin their own character setup. Those who could enter Northwestern University, especially those from the Science and Technology department, did not have a low IQ. Kara looked through the Twitter post and sneered. She retweeted it with her own comment. "Please visit the Northwestern University forum and find out about the Queen. Bessy is a national top scorer in the final exams. The 2 biggest universities competed for her. She has done a double major in her first year and every other student is lagging far behind her in each course. Was this also a script given to her? Oh, let me say one more thing. If you bring the physics question to the physics department, we can help you find 10 people who can solve it within 5 seconds. If there was a script, it at least has to be a non-linear structure question. This kind of stupid question also requires a script? Who are you looking down on?" Kara used Northwestern University's official Twitter. She didn't check with anyone first. Neither did she need to. Who was Bessy? The first person to enter the Science and Technology laboratory in December of their freshman year, and not only that, but she also had obtained 6 black cards, 1 for each experiment level. She had even helped Northwestern University surpass the University of Chicago by a huge margin, though they had fewer participants in the assessment. But Northwestern University had a confidentiality agreement for that information. Kara only reposted what "Wish You a Cool Breeze" had written and also slammed her. If it had been President Flores, he would have made her doubt her own life. Northwestern University had more than 3 million followers on their official Twitter. Every day, students from all walks of life visited Northwestern University on Twitter, hoping to be admitted. The 24-hour Idol program was also very popular. Thus, many people saw the comment by Northwestern University's Twitter. When they saw that it was Northwestern University's Twitter, most people thought it was fake at first, until they clicked on the homepage. Twitter had officially certified this account with 3 million fans. The onlookers were extremely shocked and read the comment posted by this official Twitter account. What did it mean? The Queen? The nation's top scorer? Double major? Northwestern University is also coming to share the limelight? Some anti-fans started to attack the university as well. What the fuck? She's a national top scorer? The person we couldn't find any information about during the summer holiday? Someone went to find a picture of Bessy in the final exams during the summer vacation. Wait, let me go over to see what Northwestern University's forum is saying. Science Twitter, what's a non-linear box? A non-linear black box. What was that? The onlookers went to research in silence before returning to comment. However, they couldn't find it via the search engines, and most of them only found black box problems. Finally, someone posted an explanation. It's just a problem of judging the capacitance and resistance of diodes, learned in junior high school. It seems like Bessy has a lot of support. Even Northwestern University's official website is here to clear the air. Some people immediately followed suit. 2 minutes later, a screenshot was thrown out in the comment area. Non-linear black box problem. It was hard to find on the web, so the screenshots thrown in the comment area had compiled 3 pictures. The first was of the non-linear black box. Then, the inductance, the non-linear voltage, and a circuit diagram. The most prominent thing was the obvious watermark on the background of these pictures. It said International Physics Olympiad. The Northwestern University was where all the top students in the country went, and any of them could have been a local champion. Basically, they had participated in national-level competitions in high school on behalf of their provincial and national teams, including the International Physics Olympiad. Kara had also casually written a non-linear box question, which is why she made this comment. This was a question she encountered when she participated in the International Physics Olympiad. She had not thought it was difficult to understand, as she had written it so casually. A group of netizens stared at the screenshot content dumbfounded. That ignorant netizen quickly deleted his comment when it was revealed that it was a junior high school question. At the same time, people who went to check Northwestern University's forum and who went to find the picture of this year's national top scorer also returned. Hello everyone, I went to read Northwestern University's forum and now I've come back crying. I'll show you guys a few posts. Northwestern University's forum was full of posts about Bessy. The link given by this person was a separate post on Bessy's midterm exams. Below were also screenshots of Bessy's answer sheet taken by 2 graduate students who had revised her paper. The test questions for the various examinations could also be seen above. Netizens who were college students studying advanced mathematics and physics read these questions and went crazy. This is insane. After reading Northwestern University's questions, I actually think that the physics question set by the production crew is child's play. Someone pinch me. +1. Plus ID number. She can get full marks for this kind of paper, and she even handed in her paper in advance? To tell the truth, I'm a sophomore studying mathematics, but I don't even understand what she wrote on the last question. I found the top scorer in this year's national exam. The person who won second place in the cultural sciences by over 10 points. Picture attached. It turns out that she's the top scorer who made me doubt if I should change majors. Sorry, let me slap myself in the face. Go search this year's national top scorer, then search for the difficulty of the test paper before commenting again. After posting on Twitter and watching the sharp rise in the comments and likes, Kara logged out, then got up from her bed. She went to brush her teeth and then called the student union's president. She informed him about the official Twitter post. It was Sunday and the student union's president was in the library. It's okay, I won't delete it, he assured her. On the call with Kara, he was surprised to hear about Bessy's situation. Instead of going to the library, he opened the official Twitter account and went to read the post. Northwestern University's students naturally had a sense of collective honor. Their own schoolmate was being bullied outside the school, and they were also slandering the school. Unlike many others, the student union's president was familiar with Jerome and knew about Bessy's feat in the laboratory. He also switched to Northwestern University's student union's official Twitter and retweeted the post from Wish You a Cool Breeze. He then tagged some of the top students of the student union. Many students of Northwestern University also had Twitter and had watched the program previously. They had only discovered last night that Bessy was on the show. When this Twitter incident broke out, the pictures of people ridiculing Northwestern University's school nerds also aroused their anger, especially the students of the Science and Technology department. Among these people, some were top students who were influential on Twitter. Northwestern University's sophomores, juniors, and double majors all commented one by one. I'm from the Science and Technology department. My second major is archaeology, but it's only today that I discovered that being from the Science and Technology department means that I can't study archaeology. Can't I have other interests other than STEM? Smiley face. Chemistry department, student number 201, minor in law and economics. I've gotten all my master's degrees. Sorry, I'm holding everyone back. I'm a scum from the medical department and I only minor in a foreign language. Several students had been officially verified on Twitter and comments from them sprang up like weeds. A well-known blogger revealed that the Science and Technology department's king had obtained a bachelor's degree in law in his sophomore year. Episode 343, a review of the program. One wave after another, Northwestern University's school nerds aimed at the second point of the 3 crimes post that suggested the Science and Technology department students couldn't know about the Babylonian literature. The onlookers started doubting their convictions. Most netizens lived on their mobile phones every day. Naturally, it was difficult to imagine the life of those really hard-working school nerds. This time, because of the netizens and Wish You a Cool Breeze, the school nerds all came out one by one to educate the netizens. Degree certificates, medals, experimental records. They dazzled people and left them dumbfounded.
Queen, final exam top scorer, Northwestern University school nerd, very quickly swept the entire network.
As for the character setup for Bessy, at this moment, no one really believed that the production crew would give Bessy such a simple question and ask her to recite the lines in advance. Now that things had developed to this point, it was clear at a glance that the production crew hadn't given her a character setup. Netizens also realized that compared to what Bessy did in Northwestern University, those things on the program were really nothing. As for the Babylonian literature that Wish You a Cool Breeze specifically listed, a sophomore in the Science and Technology Department posted their archaeological papers that were collected by the state, and no one dared to refute them. How could they? What could they say? All the 3 crimes tweet posted by Wish You a Cool Breeze was still pinned on her Twitter homepage. After the appearance of the real Northwestern University school nerds, her 3 crimes seemed extremely ridiculous. The sentence, "The people from Northwestern University I know aren't like that," was especially singled out and commented on. Blogger, that's because the Northwestern University school nerds you know are fake. When Zeke's manager saw Sierra's tweet, he came to the Park Place apartments to find Zeke. Over this period, the manager also understood how much Zeke valued Bessy and took care of every aspect of her well-being. He had already taken all of these into account before the show was aired and hadn't slept all night. Wish You a Cool Breeze and Sierra's movements must have heavily affected him. After entering the apartment and realizing that Zeke was still there, the manager heaved a sigh of relief. Zeke was discussing things over the phone with the production crew. The director also hadn't expected Sierra to suddenly come out to steal the limelight. Her Twitter post had insinuated that the production crew was shady.
Broadcast the 2nd episode ahead of schedule.
Zeke leaned back in his chair, his words sounding rather simple. But it made everyone's heart leap in trepidation. The director on the other end of the phone took in this command while smoking a cigarette. In fact, as long as he broadcast the 2nd episode, all rumors on the internet would be wiped out. Bessy would quickly attract fans, and that would make up for the 1st episode. Once that happened, all these negative comments would be nothing. Because of the 2nd episode, her rate of attracting fans would be terrifying, and the director felt like even Zeke and Noah couldn't compare. No matter how impressive the production crew was, could they possibly invite Toby and Noah to help shoot Bessy to fame? The problem was, the 2nd episode being broadcast in advance was unprecedented. The major TV networks wouldn't want to cooperate with these arrangements. It had to be broadcast online and on the networks on next Saturday at 8 o'clock. After all, what about the other popular TV programs? No matter how impressive the program was, they didn't dare compete with provincial TV stations, and the schedule was created by the TV stations.
Zeke, I'm still discussing this with President Soup. I'm a director and can't decide this. If you convince President Soup and open up the relationship between all levels of the TV stations and networks and get them to agree, I can even release it immediately.
The director was about to cry. Zeke irritably took out a cigarette and dialed Robert's phone number. He had decided to call him directly. The director said that this episode was broadcast under Robert's instruction. Zeke also wanted to know whether Robert was deliberately targeting Bessy. Once the phone was connected, Robert's polite voice sounded.
Mr. Miller, hello.
Even on the phone, Robert's respectful attitude was evident. Zeke was taken aback again. Robert's attitude was completely different from what he had imagined. It didn't sound like he had meant for the production to release an episode targeting Bessy. Zeke talked to him about letting the production crew broadcast the 2nd episode ahead of schedule, and also talked about the public opinion on the internet. As it was regarding Bessy, Robert immediately went downstairs. He narrowed his eyes, his tone solemn.
Okay, I'll contact the TV station and ask for things to be broadcast in advance.
They hung up. Zeke hadn't expected things to go so smoothly, especially not Robert's last sentence about contacting the TV station. Could the Soup family influence the major TV stations so easily? Zeke squinted his eyes thoughtfully. With Robert's help, this matter would probably be quickly resolved. He slowly let out a sigh of relief. He turned around and told the manager,
Notify the public relations team. The 2nd episode will be broadcast in advance. Prepare the content of the notice.
The manager continued standing, lowered his head and took out his phone again. He called the studio and then put the phone to his ear. Frowning, Jack put down his phone and then asked Zeke and his manager anxiously,
"How should we deal with this matter? It's hard to find evidence. I can only think that we should wait for the popularity to fade."
If it weren't for Zeke's words, even Jack wouldn't have believed Bessy's performance on the show, so how could the audience believe it? Zeke rubbed his temples and glanced at Tucker's closed door.
"It'll be better when the second episode comes out."
He glanced at the manager. The manager dialed a number, but before he could speak, the studio's public relations department agitatedly interrupted him.
"Why didn't you say that your niece is the top scorer of the final examination? Why did we have to prepare the draft overnight? We've been so busy, but Northwestern University just resolved it in one sentence."
Without waiting for the manager's reply, the public relations department rattled on like a machine gun.
"It's fine now. I haven't even finished reading all the tweets of the Northwestern University school nerds."
He hung up with a pop, forgetting that the manager was his superior in his excitement.
"Zeke, wait."
The manager raised his hand, surprised by the phrase,
"Top student in the final exams?"
and then opened Twitter.
"It seems like the program group doesn't need to update the second episode in advance."
The manager directly went to the hot search bar. The top 3 posts on the hot search all had an explosive number of hits. Northwestern University Queen, final exam top scorer Bessy Miller, Northwestern University's official Twitter. The manager didn't read the first hot search. He clicked directly onto the second hot search that included Bessy's name. The second most popular tweet under the topic was a post by an entertainment blogger. I didn't know it previously, and only when I checked on it did I realize just how terrifying this year's college entrance examination top scorer is. Be it Devenhoff's mathematics paper or combined sciences, candidates should remember that there was this person who arrogantly obtained all full marks. Picture, picture, picture. The first picture was of Bessy's final exam results. The second was of the nation's average score. The third was of a Twitter post from June discussing the top scorer. The manager stared at the pictures in a daze without going to the comments. Thinking of what the public relations staff had said, he continued reading the first and third hot searches. Northwestern University Queen. That trend was full of Bessy's feats at Northwestern University. Northwestern University school nerds were also posting their degree certificates.
"What on earth is going on?"
Jack was extremely anxious. Gaping, the manager took a deep breath, looked at Zeke for a long while, and finally relaxed a bit.
"Zeke, the notice draft is unnecessary, and the episode doesn't have to be broadcast in advance anymore. This matter seems to be resolved, but it's still trending. Your niece. Just look at Twitter."
Without the need for probing, Zeke had already taken out his cell phone. Upon hearing this, Jack also took his phone out and flipped through Twitter. In the kitchen, James had been busy cooking. He came out to get some green onions. He saw the 3 people standing at the table, frozen in place. James picked up the green onion and waved to the manager.
"Stay for lunch. Do you eat spicy food?"
The manager nodded without paying much attention. James immediately started preparing for another dish, looking very happy.
"Mr. Miller."
Regaining his sanity after a few minutes, the manager turned to look quietly at James.
"Your daughter is the final exam's top scorer?"
James smiled after hearing this and didn't seem surprised at all.
"Yeah, why? Fairfield's mayor even gave us $10,000 as scholarship money this year. She even got admitted to Northwestern University."
The manager was speechless. He couldn't bring himself to look at James's thick face. Were the $10,000 and Northwestern University important now? Yes, fine, she was from Northwestern University, but shouldn't the fact that she was the final exam top scorer be the first thing he mentioned? With trembling fingers holding his phone, Jack also looked up at James in shock, his mouth hanging agape. He had some eye trouble, but he could clearly read the Twitter posts. He had originally thought that the most intelligent of the Miller family's direct descendants in his lifetime would be Tucker, who was talented with computers. But after reading these posts, he realized that the Miller family's most intelligent person was Bessy, who was studying in Northwestern University's Science and Technology department. If she was willing, according to how things were developing, it was only a matter of time before she entered the research institute. James was completely ignorant of their feelings now and only suddenly straightened his body gravely.
Shit, I totally forgot to add herbs to the soup.
Disregarding them completely, he grabbed the herbs and immediately ran back to the kitchen to add them to the soup. Staring at his back, Jack finally understood why Zeke and James had been so calm about Bessy not having a character set up. After a long while, the manager turned to Zeke.
Are you okay?
He asked. Episode 344, 24-Hour Idol. Zeke was naturally not okay. Fiddling with his phone, he managed to mutter, "Yeah." After logging into his own account, he liked the posts from Northwestern University's official Twitter and all the school nerds. His fans immediately noticed these likes. Having done this, he suddenly thought of something. Flipping to Sierra's Twitter, he coldly smirked.
Handle Sierra.
Katie and Zeke hadn't been petty with her over her antics on the show, but after their return, her contract had been terminated and her work affected. But now, she was actually bold enough to not only ride on the waves of the show, but also directly step on Bessy. This point triggered Zeke. On Sierra's side, once her tweet had posted, her popularity increased sharply. In the beginning, everyone was comforting her. Half an hour later, she realized that the comments started becoming strange. The commentary style changed completely. Her post had said, "Thank you, everyone." Guessing that the production crew had forced her to comply with Bessy's character setup, most people had felt sorry for her grievances. But now, they were furious at being fooled. Sierra watched as her following decreased continuously and then went to the hot search. She started panicking. At this time, her phone rang furiously. She picked up immediately. Her manager started yelling at her.
Didn't I tell you to ride the waves and take only a slice of the pie? Do you think Zeke and the production crew are so easy to be trifled with? It's fine if you want to meet your own downfall, but why are you dragging us along? The netizens are still cursing you out. Zeke Miller and the Soup Corporation are still waiting to have their turn. We're finished. Now it's done. You've achieved your goals. You're famous. You've successfully become famous. Are you satisfied?
The Soup Corporation didn't originally have a dispute with Sierra. After all, it was the Soup Corporation staff member's mistake. But now, Sierra had made it impossible for them to ignore her. Even if there had been 100 of her, she wouldn't have been able to deal with just Zeke, let alone the Soup Corporation. Sierra's manager hung up weakly. Notifications popped up. Zeke's likes had already spread in the industry. The few people whom the manager had uneasily made connections with in the past few days all blocked him. He could only keep his tail tucked in from now on and wait for the opportunity to return once the news cycle was over. As for the 24-Hour Idol production crew, they were all in a meeting. The director had just received a notice that the Soup Corporation was aware of the incident on Twitter and could arrange to release the second episode in advance. Twitter was still abuzz with comments like, "No wonder the whole team is rethinking their lives. It turns out she's the final exam's top scorer, Northwestern University's queen." The publicity head closed Twitter and glanced at the director. "This is the second episode broadcasting in advance?" Taking a leisurely sip of his tea, the director smiled.
In advance? No, it definitely won't be broadcast in advance.
The publicity team nodded in agreement, but President Soup actually settled the TV stations so quickly.
Zeke's niece,
someone quietly said. The production crew exchanged glances. Just now, the major TV station heads had directly called to discuss this matter, and it was obvious whose influence it was due to.
I'll see if the second episode has any problems.
The publicity head got up and went out to re-watch the second episode from beginning to end and confirm that nothing was wrong. Inside the Clark family house, Michael was still holding his phone tightly, slowly flipping through Twitter. Sitting in the middle of the room, Joshua's expression was grave as a subordinate reported the situation, sitting straight as a rod. Only Michael sat casually, leaning on the pillow behind his back while lazily playing with his phone. 10 minutes ago, he had even gone out to take a phone call. Joshua had pretended not to notice. However, Aaron and the others were blind with rage, but dared not speak. Michael was at the apex of his power in the Clark family. The security guard who came back from Hawaii was now powerful enough to directly challenge Aaron. Everyone in the Clark family now knew how loyal and respectful the security guard was to Michael. After the meeting and his meal, Michael walked out with his phone. Behind him, Aaron's eyes darkened, and he turned to the person beside him.
Any response from Captain Baldwin's side?
Captain Baldwin was a famous name in the Clark family's base in Evanston. He had returned to the headquarters 2 months ago, and in just a short period managed to climb to the top position and accumulate significant power. Other than a few neutral security guards, the security guard from Hawaii and the others now had the capacity to threaten Aaron. Aaron couldn't sit still. Previously, he had tried to reel Captain Baldwin in subtly, step by step, but now he was doing it openly.
Captain Baldwin's side hasn't responded yet. He's only focused on bringing his men to training. He's being as indifferent as the other security guard.
His subordinate responded, teasing Joshua's parrot with his fingers. Aaron frowned slightly and said in a grave voice,
"Continue working on him."
It was even better if Captain Baldwin had a stubborn personality. At least he wouldn't be reeled in by Michael. Furthermore, even if Aaron couldn't reel him in, he could still make his presence known to him. When the Clark family held a vote next time, even if Captain Baldwin was neutral, he might still cast his vote for Aaron. Thinking of this, Aaron slightly heaved a sigh of relief. Instead of returning to the Highline apartments, Michael drove to the Park Place apartments and waited across the street. He looked down at the message on his phone from Bessy, telling him not to come upstairs. Casually throwing the phone on the seat beside him, he put his hands on the steering wheel and leaned back in his seat. He squinted at James's building with clear eyes, his expression cold. James's door opened and Zeke and James came out with Bessy to send her off.
"Why don't you stay for dinner?"
James nagged and looked up at the car parked across the street.
"Michael is here to pick you up. Why don't you let him come in and sit for a while?"
He was about to go over to greet Michael. However, Bessy put on her scarf and reached out to grab his sleeve. She looked up, her face expressionless. "He's down with a bad cold. It's not convenient." James nodded and didn't go over. He nagged at her to take care of herself and dress warmly. Then he let her leave. Standing aside silently, Zeke and Jack naturally understood that Bessy didn't want them to see Michael. Zeke stared at the black car. He couldn't see the person in the driver's seat through the darkened window. He only saw the cold light reflected from the cufflinks on his wrist. The black car slowly drove over, and James suddenly thought of something.
"Michael has a cold, but why is Bessy with him? What if she catches it as well?"
He immediately took out his phone to call Michael. Zeke glanced at him. He noticed James had saved the name as Michael. He stayed behind with Jack as James went upstairs. Even after Michael's car disappeared from view, Jack was still staring in the direction.
"If only James's father was still alive and Miss Miller had grown up in the Miller family."
She had developed into such a genius even while wandering far from home. If the Miller family had cultivated her with its former glory, how different would the situation be now? Jack was now full of enthusiasm. Tucker had inherited the Miller family's computing talent, while Bessy had inherited her grandfather's intelligence. After so many years, finally, someone in the Miller family had the talent to enter the research institute.
"Don't intervene in Bessy's matters in the future."
Zeke looked away and glanced at Jack, his voice strict.
"Don't burden her with the Miller family matters."
Sighing, Jack chuckled.
"Zeke, you're thinking too much."
They had already fallen from grace and didn't even have control of the research institute anymore. The only thing in their hands were some projects in the IT department. So how could they possibly bring the research institute matters in front of Bessy? The two stayed in the cold breeze for a while before Jack finally remembered Tucker's matter from the previous night.
"Any news on Tucker's teacher?"
That weekend, the Northwestern University school nerds blew up Twitter. The 2 moments from the show, fear of being dominated by Northwestern University school tyrants .gif and who doesn't have a second degree .gif were all the rage on the internet for the whole weekend. Everyone rewatched 24-Hour Idol several times. Some netizens even discovered a few new highlights.
"Ha ha ha, why didn't I notice this before? When Bessy came out of the house, the director even sounded so weak."
Yes. Also, after she calculated the hexadecimal, the production crew's voices became stiff. Stupid director, what kind of 24-hour idol show is this? Can't you see how bright the sky is? I think it's more like 8-hour idol. It was called 24-hour idol because it would usually record from morning to night. The production crew's setup was perverse and difficult, so they could normally record until about 10 p.m. But now, they finished so early. The netizens slapped their tables in laughter. Some people even went to the program's official Twitter and told them to change their name to 8-hour idol. They made comments like, "What rights do you have to be so arrogant?" More and more people tagged the official Twitter of the show, begging for Bessy's Twitter handle. It was at the top of the hot search as they begged the production crew to respond. Finally sensing a chance to retaliate after being mocked, the official Twitter replied coldly, "She has none. What comes around goes around." The netizens urged for the second episode to be released, with tears. Boo-hoo! I look forward to the friends invited by the goddess Bessy. Will she invite someone from Northwestern University's student union? The stupid production crew has their lips sealed so tightly. I hope you guys collectively explode. Episode 345. Blame her for being too irritating. Bessy wasn't bothered about what happened online and was busy finding the new version of the book she had promised Tucker. On Monday, she went to school early in the morning. After class in the afternoon, she took out her phone to see that Caleb had yet to add her on Twitter. Resting her chin in her hand, she thought about whether she should hack his contact information and then call him. At this time, she received another friend request. She opened it to see the message. "Hello, I'm Mr. Rostron's student assistant in the laboratory." Bessy added this person. They didn't send any further messages. She casually put away her phone and went to the library. At 3 p.m., she finally received a message from the student assistant. "The laboratory is on the third basement floor, B317. Come here first." The message was concise and clear. Bessy packed up her books and went to the laboratory with her backpack. The laboratory was on the third floor underground, in room B317. Bessy walked to the door and saw a tall woman wearing protective clothing, holding experimental equipment in her hands. She noticed Bessy, hesitated for a while, and then lowered her voice. "Are you the new student assigned to Mr. Rostron's laboratory this year?" Few new members in the laboratory were girls, so 2 a year was already considered good. This new member was a girl, and she was even pretty. Nodding, Bessy said calmly, "Hello, my name is Bessy Miller." She was quite polite. "Yes, my name is Sarah May. I'm now Mr. Rostron's student assistant." The tall woman looked away and then stepped outside the lab. "Follow me to change your clothes first. Mr. Rostron is very busy at the moment and doesn't have time to meet you. I'll first familiarize you with the laboratory this week." Bessy followed her to the changing room and put on a set of protective clothing. Then she followed Sarah into the laboratory. The laboratory was large and long, with a lot of precision instruments. Records of experiments filled the surrounding shelves, and some engineering research materials were also randomly placed on a few shelves. These materials were written by professors and researchers, and some were from research done in the hospital. The entire laboratory was divided into 3 sections by glass walls. Bessy and Sarah stood in the outermost area. Inside the inner areas, 2 figures stood, their faces unclear. Sarah took out a handbook from the shelf at the entrance and gave it to Bessy. "This is the basic manual used by your laboratory. If you have a free moment, remember to check it out. Our laboratory has a total of 3 students. The one inside is Elijah." Sarah pointed to him, then continued. "Mr. Rostron is doing very important research. You can move around in the 2 outer areas, but don't randomly touch things. And don't disturb Mr. Rostron in the innermost room." Looking down and flipping through the manual with her delicate eyebrows lowered, Bessy calmly answered, "Okay." Sarah glanced at her, and then went in and passed the equipment in her hand to Mr. Rostron. Mr. Rostron was looking at the data displayed on the screen in front of him, frowning. "Mr. Rostron, the new student is outside," Sarah said. Nodding, Mr. Rostron remained silent and didn't even turn to look. He was originally from the Research Institute, not the laboratory. In the Research Institute, he rarely brought new students because it was too troublesome. He only had 2 students, Sarah and Elijah. The experimental process had always been slow. Major laboratories already had microreactor experimental equipment from the Research Institute. As long as students could control the current and the number of reactions, they could make a microfusion reaction as well as energy testing equipment. However, the reaction had too many variables. He had discussed with other scholars more than once in the research institute, and so far, he still had yet to find the material that could replace the magnetic field and laser to control the reaction process. The laboratory had a reactor underground that had been left by a researcher at the research institute 20 years ago. A layer of unknown metal laid outside the reactor. So far, no one in the research institute had identified the metal material. Mr. Rostron looked at the data and returned to the experimental bench behind him.
Elijah, increase the magnetic field.
He stared at the micronuclear fusion happening under the glass cover. Elijah walked to the other side and pressed the button on the instrument, increasing the current and controlling the magnetic field. Seeing Mr. Rostron's behavior, Sarah didn't mention the new student further.
Give me the data from yesterday's experiment.
Mr. Rostron watched the reaction, pushing his glasses up and speaking in a serious tone. Sarah thought for a while and walked outside to get the data. After reading the laboratory manual, Bessy strolled around the outermost area. What she focused on was the engineering research and laboratory materials on the shelves. Bessy, coming from inside, Sarah glanced up at her as she flipped through the shelf. Find the records of yesterday's experiment, print them out and bring them over. It's on the computer behind you. After speaking, she turned and went back in. Bessy stopped flipping through the book. She glanced behind her. An LCD computer was placed in the corner of the room, still turned on, and the screen densely displayed many documents. The documents were marked with a date and serial number. Bessy took a look and found yesterday's data record on the screen. She scanned the cumbersome data and disorderly tables. Then she pulled out a chair and sat down. She tidied up the form, reordering the experimental records and conclusions. 10 minutes later, she clicked the button to print the documents. Checking that there was no problem, she directly walked to the laboratory on the innermost floor. Instead of entering, she just stood at the glass door. She knocked on it with her fingers, but the sound wasn't loud. When Sarah saw her, she came out and walked straight to the computer. "Is there something you don't understand about the data record?" she asked. The daily data records were messy and cumbersome. Previously, she and Elijah had taken turns collating them, and most of the content was brought over from the research institute. Seeing Bessy approach her, her first reaction was naturally that Bessy didn't understand something. "No." Bessy handed the printed documents to her and slowly said, "It's printed." "Huh?" Sarah was taken aback. "So fast?" Looking down, she opened the experimental records and flipped through them. The records on it were orderly and carefully sorted out without any obvious mistakes. Sarah took the experimental records and handed them to Mr. Rostron. Then, she came back and took out another form and handed it to Bessy in a hurry. "Calculate this," she said before returning to the inner room. Bessy took a look at it. With one hand in her pocket, she stood outside and looked at the 3 people inside for a while. Then, she went back out to the outermost area, picked up the book on the shelf, and read it for half an hour. Only then did she open the software on the computer. She typed a string of code and then looked at the results displayed. She wrote down the messy and cumbersome data before showing it to Sarah, who didn't say anything since she had taken a normal amount of time. Pulling out the stool in front of the computer, Bessy sat down, crossed her legs, and put the book on her lap. She leaned back and slowly read it. Under the incandescent lamp, her eyes were like cold jade. When Elijah took his cup to the drinking fountain outside to get water, he saw the newcomer flipping through the book and was taken aback. This kind of beauty was indeed rare in the laboratory. He stared at her as she turned over the logs of the Science and Technology department. Elijah introduced himself.
"You must be the new assistant here."
She greeted him and continued to look at the logs. Her eyes were cold. This new assistant was a little cool. Elijah filled up his cup and stood by the water dispenser, drinking water while watching Bessy. Then he walked to the shelf beside him, found a book, and walked towards Mr. Rostron while flipping through it. After turning to the research page that Mr. Rostron needed, he looked outside again. Bessy was still sitting on the chair and calmly flipping through the book as if she hadn't just entered the laboratory and wasn't a terrified, ignorant newcomer. When Bessy was halfway through the book, her phone buzzed. She picked it up from the table and glanced at it. It was a message from Michael. He asked her when she was getting out of class. She glanced at the time. It was 5:30. She clicked on the chat and slowly typed a response. I'm in the laboratory. I don't know when they'll finish their experiments. She hadn't even seen Mr. Rostron's face yet. After sending this sentence, she threw her phone back onto the table and continued flipping through the logs. The logs recorded all kinds of events from the time the laboratory was established to the present day. The one Bessy was flipping through was updated through last year. What happened 20 years ago was vaguely breezed past. She spent nearly 2 hours reading the book from beginning to end. Closing it, she stood up with her hands on the table and leaned on it. Checking the time, it was 7 p.m. She put the book back on the shelf. When she turned around, Mr. Rostron and the others had come out. Without taking off his protective clothing, Mr. Rostron put on his gold-rimmed glasses and looked at her. You... He had focused on the experiment and hadn't paid attention when Sarah talked to him. Sarah reminded him, Mr. Rostron, this is the new student, Bessy.
Oh yes, Bessy.
He nodded.
If there's anything you don't understand in the future, you can check the information from both sides or ask one of them. Otherwise, you can shout for me.
After that, he went outside. Bessy, we're going to eat. Sarah took off her protective clothing and turned to Bessy. You can tidy up the things in the laboratory and leave whenever you're done. Crossing her arms, Bessy stood for a while in the laboratory thinking. Then she walked over to one of the tables, annoyed. Her hands had just touched the voltmeter when it was snatched away by